So what's up, Jay?
Thank God you're back.
Oh, yeah. I bet you're so happy.
Oh, man. I've been trying to hold it down for 4 episodes.
Looking at the calendar, figuring out when I'm leaving again.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm just in here. I've been the Lone Ranger. I've had guests, but so far so good, I think. So the reception is better than I was hoping for, or expecting.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm the villain, so they got to like you.
You're the heel, not the villain. You're
the heel.
Yeah.
The heel.
Yeah, the heel. It's cool.
Yeah. There's no baby face without the heel.
That's right.
Hey, so you brought your Uncle Ron with you today.
Yeah, Uncle Ron's here today.
My pleasure.
Yep. Yeah. So, I've been a fan of Ron's content for a while. I don't even know how long. A few years for sure.
A couple months anyway.
A couple months, yeah, for sure. Outside of Q, I'm interested in a lot of the traditional guns and cartridges and stuff like that, and that is definitely up your alley.
Yeah.
So it was interesting, and we had a couple mutual contacts. I reached out to Jason at Field Ethos and said, I need you to get me in touch with Ron Spomer. And he did within 15 minutes. So
that's the guilty party.
Jason,
Jason
he's like Ron Dan. They know everyone.
Everybody.
Everyone. So, thanks for coming out, man.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me out. What you guys do here at Q is kind of kind of out there for my part of the world, but it's really interesting stuff. And I've kind of had to open my mind to the possibilities. I think I said earlier this. It's sort of like transitioning from the black powder muzzleloader days into modern centerfire cartridges. We're taking a similar leap, I think, with your modern designs your engineers have come up with. Use new materials, new thinking, new ways of making things work rather than just slowly building and evolving and taking a piece off there, adding a chunk there. It's really remarkable what you guys have been able to do.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for having an open mind to the not-so-traditional stuff, because some guys aren't that way.
Yeah, it's easy to get hidebound in traditional.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're talking about, even when you think about the fix or rifles, like I was just in Cameroon hunting with a, pre-64 Winchester Model 70 and 375, because you can't take, any military-looking weapons into Cameroon.
Yeah. Right.
And I love that gun. I love all firearms, and you may be the same way. And, I'm just so inherently interested in firearms, but I love having to hunt with a traditional gun once or twice a year that doesn't have a folding stock, that doesn't take a silencer, that the barrel's too long.
It's a reminder.
And it's like, this is why we did the fix, detachable magazines. Because at some point, you see the evolution of the traditional bolt gun, and tons of companies make them now with chassis and all these things. But at the end of the day, eventually you just have to stop trying to evolve that, and you got a clean slate and start over. And I think that's what the fix sort of represents, in my opinion.
I agree. That's what I noticed when I started looking at it. Going, of course, initially you say, well, this is another battle rifle, modern military battle rifle. But then you go, well, wait a minute, it has a bolt, a manually operated bolt, so it's a bolt action. Okay, we're getting a little closer to home now.
Yes.
And then I start looking at how do you make that bolt ride in that flimsy little, feeling like a flimsy little receiver out of aluminum. Where's your strength? How are you going to hold all this stuff together? And it's a real eye-opener once you realize you need to stop and allow the sort of innovation that occurred 100 years ago. The Model 700s and the Model 70s didn't just pop up out of nowhere. They had to be developed by somebody, and I'm sure at the time there were plenty of old-timers saying, this modern crap, who needs it? Give me my muzzle loader. There's a long transition period from the old guard to the new.
Yeah.
But, in this 21st century, I think people are used to much quicker changes. So I don't think you guys are going to be waiting for decades until this catches fire, because folks are ready.
Yeah.
No, all the technology and everything, is sped up so fast. Like I was just telling your wife, I turned 50 this year in January, and so many young people work here, and telling all these guys, like, I had never been on the internet until after I graduated college. I didn't own a computer until after I graduated college. And how different the world is already, and just how much faster technology is evolving than it ever has.
Yeah.
Well, Nick made a good point earlier too, explaining, if you look at the Model 70 that he has, 20s, 30s, when they were making those originally, we have different, Nick said, if they had the technology or the manufacturing capabilities that we have now, That's not the gun they would have made.
Of course not.
And he's like, I'm not saying they would make the fix, but they wouldn't have made the Model 70. So
No.
it all comes down to that. I mean, if everything else is going to evolve, why shouldn't the gun?
Yeah, I mean, I think in every industry are people who are passionate about things. That's an interesting thing about firearms because most of us are really passionate about it. And so you get on team whatever, a traditional gun for hunting, it has to be that way. But we think about something that was way ahead of its time, in my opinion, the AR-15 with Stoner. I mean, what a brilliant guy, But if he had modern technology now, materials, manufacturing, he wouldn't have done the bolt or bolt carrier the way he did, where you have to grind it, hone it, and hard chrome it. Like he would do a carrier like, we did at SIG and the MCX.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have those features that you have to outsource and that are, now just like EPA and OSHA stuff for some of those processes, it's becoming difficult, and you have more accurate modern equipment and better materials. Like he wouldn't have done it that way. And he was way ahead.
It's crazy to think about because you wonder what could have been or what would be if that were the case.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully
we do it every day.
Guns would be the fix.
I was going to say, we do it every day, but
You built a gun today.
I did. I don't know if I could take full credit for it, but I put it together. Yeah, it was really remarkable how simple it was. When you look at one of these, you think, oh my gosh, this must be really complicated. But I think the complicated part went on in your brains, your engineers, and Nick figuring that stuff out, and Mitch, I guess, involved in all of that. That's what's really fascinating to me is how someone can have that innate mechanical genius to think, knowing what you know about technology and materials and how this all goes together and the mechanics of it all, and then put it together, something that innovative. That it's not that you springboarded off of someone else. You really reinvented the wheel.
That gun, yes, I think absolutely. It's undeniable with that gun. And that's not me trying to pat myself on the back. Like all I did was we had talked about a new bolt gun for years, he and Nick and Ethan and I, and how there needs to be a replacement for the 700.
Mm-hmm.
Is this prolific bolt action rifle that's commercially successful for the armed forces and stuff like that. Because once I sold my old company to Remington, we did the M2010, so upgrading the Army's M24 rifles, and so that was making those long action 308s, 300 Win Mag, and then doing the chassis for them. And we learned there. And then doing the MSR rifle for SOCOM, which was the 338 sniper rifle that was modular with a titanium receiver. So that was the next step. You could switch the barrel, all these things. And we need to do that in aluminum, and that's the new commercial rifle. And, start talking about it with Ethan and Nick. And Nick, we decided to start this company. He's like, no, we don't need to do that at all. And I'm like, that's what we've been talking about for years. He's like, yeah, you just didn't think about it enough. We need to get rid of the chassis. Mm-hmm. So we do need to do an aluminum receiver. And, it just evolved. But from the day we started the company, we sat in a conference room with a whiteboard. And we've been talking about the gun for years. So we were ready because we wanted to do it at SIG. SIG wasn't interested. We wanted to start doing it at Advanced Armament when Remington owned my company. They weren't interested. So we'd wanted to do it. And it was a place where we thought there's been no real innovation in bolt guns in a very long time.
Right.
Mechanically, like putting a chassis or whatever, fine. But okay, start from scratch. And it was literally a half-hour meeting, and we prioritized what we wanted the gun to be. And 6 months later, we're shooting the gun.
Crazy.
Which I don't even think we could do now, but we wanted it so bad then that's what happened.
Yeah, I told that to Ron earlier, and even then he was like, that's insane. I mean, because it's one thing he's been in the industry for probably as long as I've been alive, realistically.
Maybe more.
You've been in the, I was going to say, because you've been in the industry longer than I've been alive.
31 years.
Yeah. So, but I mean, even if you were to start a gun company right now and make an AR, it's going to take you a while. I mean, if you do one thing different, it might take you a year, it might take you a year and a half. And that's something that's done a million times a day all over the country. But to do something that hasn't existed yet and to just think about it, formulate it, produce it in 6 months is insane.
It was. It's crazy to think about now. Like if you asked me now if we could do that, I'd be like, "There's no way." And we
see it sort of.
Ago.
Yeah.
How long has the fix been out there?
We started working on it in March of 2016. We probably shipped the first one about a year later, 2017.
And what are sales like? How has it taken off, or is it steadily progressing, or what's been the consumer acceptance?
I would say both. Here was the interesting part. So for 6 years, we were back ordered a year or more on everything.
A year. Wow.
So I never marketed. I never did any marketing. Thomas was the first person I hired in marketing, and he's probably worked here, like 2.5 years?
Almost 3 years, yeah, or just over, whatever, yeah.
Okay, so 3 years.
3 years, we'll say.
And so I did our Instagram and all of our marketing, and we were back ordered. What was important to me was that the engineers designed the gun. They had to do all the drawings, order the parts, deal with the vendors, QC the parts, come up with the QC methods and what was important for the components, and then the fixturing for all that, and then do all the assembly. So they would do all the fixturing because they're lazy. So they would do fixturing for everything, for sub-assemblies, and then they shot every gun for accuracy. Every gun for the first, 2 years or 2,000 guns, I don't even remember now, had to be 5-round groups that they shot and had to be sub-MOA. Every gun. And then over time, we've adjusted that. But what they did, I wanted to be able to eventually hire assembly personnel that the first day they could be trained to build a gun as good as the engineers. So having the engineers do all that stuff, and they wanted to do it because, the gun's their baby. Mm-hmm. That's the hope, that they know every step of the way and that we could hand this over and it's easy for people to build, consistent quality guns that were as good as the guys that developed the gun could do. Yeah. And that was sort of my philosophy. The downside is it's very expensive and it's slow, but I think it worked. I don't know if I would do everything the same way all over again, but what we've created is now we build, I don't know how many a month, but I don't even know what we'll do this year. So we may sell 20,000 of them, let's say, this year, and that's a guess. The guns are better and better quality every year, because my goal for the company is that we innovate and we grow at a rate where we can sustain improving quality as we grow. When you think of, there's some big gun companies that weren't that big 5-10 years ago, and the quality was far superior to what you get now. And so that's kind of a philosophy at the company. Like when I got into guns 31 years ago, HK was kind of the pinnacle of like a quality firearm and, a modern firearm. And I want us to grow into that. And I don't know if we'll ever achieve that, but I hope, and we're going to try every day, but where we can have growth and we can grow at a rate where we can make better quality guns and products every single year that are innovative. Because, it's easy to make a good quality AR-15 because everybody's done all the hard work.
Yeah.
But figuring this stuff out, because you can figure out a design. Everybody has a good idea, but how do you implement that into a product? How do you produce it and sell it? It's not easy. Developing products, innovation is very expensive, but it's my passion here. Unfortunately, it's the engineering team as well.
Yeah, I would imagine you would have to get some like-minded engineers that have a similar passion and are willing to put that extra effort into it. It's not like they're just coming in for that paycheck and go home at 5 o'clock. You've got to be thinking and living and breathing this stuff, don't you?
It would never work in our engineering department. And there are people, they work 9 to 5, and I get it, and that's your life, and there's people we need like that at this company. But you would not survive a week in engineering without sacrificing some of your personal life. And that doesn't come from me. That comes from their own passions.
Yeah.
And so those guys that started it, they're in charge now, and they bring in junior engineers, and it's great. But every one of our engineers, there's no wall here to where they design on the computer and it gets handed off to a different department. They design the guns. They can run every machine that's in the back. They do the testing themselves. I mean, this is the first year where I convinced the senior engineers to hire junior engineers to do the testing for them, like educate them, do the testing protocol, go once a week and check on them and have them, provide you with all the data. And we're high-speed videoing everything they do. And, you guys can do all that, but that's going to be half the year that you're not designing stuff. And these are how these young guys are going to learn.
Yeah.
And just that work ethic
they stepped up, seeing Matt and Drew. I obviously see Mitch and Nick doing what I always see Mitch and Nick doing, but seeing Matt is doing something crazy I remember when Matt was intern, and now he's in the trench. He's doing a ton of work. Drew, same way. All the drop testing. I mean, literally 2 years of drop testing.
Yeah, you think so? It was 18 months to 2 years, and we did our own AR trigger. And it's just because, well, we couldn't sell Geisley to some of the military groups around the world because you can make those double, so it's a no-go. And then we were using AR Golds, and they were having some issues, and we were trying to work with them to redesign their trigger. Like, I never wanted to make triggers, but we wanted the best trigger in the world for our gas guns. So we do the trigger, decide we're going to do it. And what we do, Ethan and I, most of our work in the industry has been geared around military stuff and all that testing. So we're like, okay, well, if we're going to do a trigger, we're going to make the best trigger we know how. Well, we're going to need to be able to pass NATO and U.S. drop test. And so, you know, most companies, and especially companies our size, what most, I think, consumers don't understand is Ethan and I, my business at Advanced Armament was primarily military direct stuff to SOCOM. So I was involved in all that testing. And so that kind of formed my early mindset of what the gun needs to do. Then Ethan growing up at SIG, you know, and he would shoot 250,000 rounds a year through handguns there. Ethan was the first degreed engineer in SIG in America.
Wow.
He was the 86th employee, and now they have 3,500 currently. So he would shoot 250,000 rounds himself. And so that's just ingrained in Ethan and I. And it's like, even if we're going to do a commercial product, there's probably never going to be a time where we develop a product that wouldn't have some crossover for the military. Because, you know, you hunt a lot, and like hunting and killing stuff that's just what it is, so there's a lot of crossover.
Yeah, well, you think of most successful hunting cartridges and rifles, they initially came from the military. That was who's going to have the money to invest in something like that? We're happily hunting with bows until the military needs a firearm,
right,
and they come up with a matchlock.
And the government's got a couple bucks to develop that.
I mean, because there probably weren't even commercial hunting rifles, and like the 03, that's what everyone used for years.
Well, go back farther than that. Revolutionary War, we either had to steal them from the British military, or there were a few, fortunately, German gun makers, hobbyists, down on the farm in Pennsylvania making rifled-barreled long rifles as one-off. There weren't enough of them, but they were a superior firearm. Yeah. And that's part of what helped us pick off the redcoats from a distance and win that thing. Yeah. But prior to that, I think it was you find yourself a rifle from the military or you don't have one.
Yeah, there wasn't a big commercial market at the time, and then sporting and hunting, and that produces this market we have now. You know, and for us, and I love that the market is so big in this country and there's so many consumers, but there's levels too. And we're talking about that trigger, like Ethan and I knew we would end up selling it to the military and the government. And before we ever sold any commercially, we already had a contract with a European country delivering triggers to them. But Ethan knew that, so he says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and set up the drop protocol. So we finished the trigger, and it's 18 months before we ever shipped any, because we high-speed video 2,000 drops of a gun with it, and you got to go through that. And so, yeah, a lot of guys can develop a AR trigger, let's say, but like why our stuff costs money is we're not going to have Gen 5 of the trigger in 2 years now. We did all that work. Like, it's all done. We knew what had to be done in the beginning, and we did it all up front before we start delivering the trigger. And, you know, it's hard when we know we've got a product that every gun I ship, I can save $100 bill if I put our trigger in it, if I'm putting a Geisley trigger, let's say. Okay, so I'm not going to do that for the next 30,000 guns because we're going to do all the drop tests to make sure this is correct.
So the drop test is specified by a military, or is each country different?
Generally, no. Like the U.S. has a standard that they use, and then there's a NATO standard, sort of like, you know, like a CIP or whatever for cartridges. Right. So they have a standard for it. So we poured the proper slab and hung it. You know, I forget what it is. One's
like 3 meters.
It was 3 meters.
Well, we poured the slab after because Drew broke the floor a couple times, actually, and then we poured a slab for it.
So you're building a rifle, dropping it to see that trigger does not break from a fall.
The gun won't fire.
I was gonna say,
the military specifies it has to slam at this height,
at this angle,
that angle, all the different things, just to make sure it's going to always be infallible. And you had to do it how many times to prove it?
I think we high-speed video, we did 2,000 drops over 18 months.
Yeah.
And broke the concrete.
Oh, yeah. Numerous times, yeah. And, I mean, there's like I said before, the scope that Drew was using, this piece of iron, basically a steel rod.
Just some
I
weight.
mean, and it got to the point where he was using, instead of scope mounts, he was using scope rings because he's blowing he's breaking top rails or breaking the scope rings. Like the guns are getting throttled. Like your gun's not going to survive it anyway, but it was still drop safe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the average hunter has no concept that this sort of research goes on.
No, but you think, and it hasn't always, and there become these standards over time, but there's no industry requirement for everyone to do this. You can accept your own liability for the most part. But, you've been around long enough to know the Remington trigger fiascos, and like that's stuff you want to avoid. You don't ever want to see someone, accidentally get shot or anything like somebody get hurt by, you not doing enough testing of your product. And, and it happens. So we try to avoid that.
You see companies too, like once a company does it like us, we've done it here. No, you see it can be done. If you see other companies kind of try to chase that dragon, things happen. Nut and Fancy figured that out with the Cross. He dropped his bolt one day and the gun went off, and that caused a whole recall. I mean, that was like, that stuff happens, but it's like you're trying to. It's reactionary. Like we did something proactively and then did all the testing or whatever. But when everyone else is doing things reactionary, that's where you miss steps or you don't create a proper product.
Yeah.
SIG's grown a lot.
They certainly have.
Grown a lot. So 10 years ago, there were 600 people there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard to
I
growing
remember,
that fast for everything to not miss stuff.
I was gonna say, I think they had just hit 1,000 people when I first started working there. They just hit 1,000.
Really?
And now there's
3,500.
Yeah.
30,000?
3,500.
Oh, 3,500.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Ron, where are you from? What's your background? How'd you get into this?
Oh boy, as I always say, I was just a country boy from South Dakota, farm kid growing up in the 60s and doing what was fun, which was hunting pheasants, and ducks, and later deer. We didn't have any deer at first.
Yeah.
They came in, but with all the farming and the shelter belts we planted, it was prairie country prior to that. But by the time a couple of generations had farmed it enough, now you've got the food for the whitetail. You just needed some brush to grow up, and along the creeks and the fence line edges and things, we got that brush, and the deer started working their way up from Missouri and Iowa up the Missouri River.
Okay, so it just happened organically. Like the state didn't
no introductions or anything.
Okay,
they just started showing up. I can remember the first deer I saw. I heard the screen door of the old farmhouse slam, and my aunt was screaming, "Deer, deer, deer!" And we all ran out to the back, and there was a doe with 2 spotted fawns in July hopping across the cornfield, and it was a marvel to see something like that.
There was a period of time in the country where whitetail were pretty endangered, correct? Is this?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they ever were officially endangered.
Certain areas.
Okay.
Yeah, but in certain areas. And then there were certain parts of the country where traditionally they weren't, the plains states, bison country. But the addition of crops and controlled water, I think, made it possible for them.
Water in those areas,
Yeah, so when you start getting a good crop in wheat, alfalfa, corn, and all these things, well, there's their food source. And then the farmers and ranchers were putting in water, wells for the cattle. So suddenly all those dry plains that the bison used to have to make major migrations across to get from one river to the next, they might have to go 50, 60, 80 miles.
Yeah.
Well, now a whitetail's going to find water on every section. From somebody's pond or well or something. So that really helped the population there.
But they did reintroduce in a lot of places.
That's what I thought.
Like in Georgia, the population's crazy now, but I think they just reintroduced in a lot of places in Georgia in the 70s.
Yeah.
The 70s were big on reintroduction of all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Including, say, otter. I can remember when I was working for Fish and Game in South Dakota, and I was up on a lot of what the states were doing and trading with one another. Like, we've got turkeys. You need turkeys to start your turkey population? We need some bobcats.
Yeah, that is cool.
Whatever everybody had, they were trading them around and moving it. And, of course, the hunters were funding it all.
Yeah. There was some waterfowl, I think, too, on the East Coast that were reintroduced. I mean, Todd Askins was telling me about it. There were certain waterfowl that they hunt now that were pretty much non-existent, and then obviously through hunting, funding it all, and conservation, that's how you get that stuff back. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you went to work for DNR there?
Yeah, right out of high school, I was going to be a biologist or a game warden or something because I just wanted to be in the hunting field.
Yeah.
But I was never really big on math and statistics and chemistry and all the rest of it. I was real interested in biology. But when I talked to some of the college professors, then they said, well, if your passion is hunting and fishing, you don't want to be a game warden because you're not going to be hunting and fishing except for poachers. You're going to be spending all your hunting season arresting other guys. We're having all the fun. And I had a high school English teacher who was a hunter and a gun nut, and we kind of buddied up as much as you can with a teacher and a student. But he encouraged me. I had a natural knack for language and could ace the English courses and stuff. And he put the idea into my head to be a writer. Because I was always I was reading Outdoor Life and Sports of the Field in class, hide it behind the textbook. And he knew it. But he said, those magazines you're reading, you can get paid for writing those kinds of stories.
There's somebody like you writing them.
Yeah. And then that planted the seed. So I thought, maybe I'll just go to school and get a degree in English, get a teaching certificate to cover my butt in case I can't make it.
Sure.
But try writing. So as soon as I got out of college, I sat down, I wrote 5 stories, sent them to my 5 favorite magazines, and sold all 5 of them.
Really?
Wow. Cold, just over the transom.
That's awesome.
Oh, that is incredible. That's great.
It was the passion. It's just like you with your business. You've got the passion, you know what you want, and you go for it. And I'd studied those magazines and read them all my life. I knew what I liked to read.
Sure.
So I figured other people were going to be interested in the same thing from my perspective. So that's what I wrote, and that's what got me started.
That's awesome.
Man, I should have done that. We did the same thing with magazines, but we did them with Playboys and boating magazines.
Nobody wants to see you naked.
True.
No, that's great. It's interesting to think about, like, you had a passion at such a young age. And you and I were talking a few minutes ago outside. It's like my passion was not to work in a factory and then falling in love with guns. And I didn't grow up around guns. Grew up in a city. So I didn't have a gun until my late teens, and I didn't hunt until we started developing 300 Blackout.
Wow.
But I don't know why. I think mechanically guns were simple enough where I could understand it. And then it was, I can make some improvements with some things. Like I couldn't have designed like a watch or a car or plane or anything. But like guns, I think it was just technical enough to hold my interest. And then it's a fun thing. Like shooting is fun. Like when I started at my first gun was a Ruger Mark II, and my first handgun. And shooting that, I just fell in love with shooting. Like shooting was so fun, target shooting. And then it's like, I could make an improvement to this or that. And so I became more interested in firearms. And it's like, man. And I thought at first, I'm going to do something with guns, design and develop products. And that'll be like a side business for me. But, still in my head at that time because of, my parents or whatever, you have to have a job. And a job means something you get paid to do that you don't like.
Yeah.
And as I got older, it was just like the desperation of, I don't want a job I don't like. And then I worked my ass off, but it never felt that way because I had parents that had jobs they didn't like and they worked their ass off. So I see that. And when it's something you love, it's probably the same with you with writing. That part of it never has felt like work. I feel like I don't even have a job. But now that I'm 50 and I have a lot of employees, and you look at it and it's like, like I gave away my life until I was 30. It was completely dedicated to this. And I worked like all I did. I feel the same way now. I just don't have to do all the jobs now. But I, would get up at, sometimes even back then 9 o'clock, but I would stop working at 1 a.m. every day or whatever. And you do that 7 days a week. It's just like all you do. And I loved it. It never really felt like a job, but before I knew it, with the gun stuff, I'm making enough money to like have my own place and pay for my insurance. And, it just grew.
Maybe you don't need that other job.
Yeah. And so, and that's what happened. And I'm still 31 years. I'm so passionate about it. I mean, I say that I work half the time now, but I'm gone half the time. But when I'm here in New Hampshire, when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think about is work and what I'm going to do today. And I'm excited.
And you don't dread it, do you?
No, I can't wait to get to work every day.
That's the key. Just what you said. If you are working until midnight, 1 a.m, and still wanting to keep working until you realize I've got to go to sleep at some point, but then when you wake up the next morning, you want to get right back to work. You are working your passion.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I would think about it, and it's just I never felt like I worked because I loved it, and you're always thinking about, because I don't know how it is with you with your writing and stuff, but I'm into it, and then I'm instantly thinking about the next one and the next day, and I can't wait. And I don't know, how many people believe in a destiny or manifesting it or whatever, but I don't think I'll ever be satisfied, and that's really annoying in some ways, probably for a lot of people here. But I don't care. I know that we may never accomplish all the things I could dream of, but what I do know is we're going to do a lot more than most everyone else, and I get to stay passionate about it. Like I don't want to be content with this company and what we're doing. I want to make the best stuff, the most innovative stuff, and I can't wait till the next thing. When people ask me, like, I'll be in your spot, and I say, well, what's the best, your thing you're most proud of or you're most excited about? It's like, it's the next thing.
The next thing.
Always the next thing. And and I still, you can see it now. Like, I just love it. I love this, and I'm so happy that I found it. I'm so happy that I found it at 18 and not at 50. I'd be kicking myself in the pants if I'd become an attorney and decided to quit when I was 50.
I think most of the advancements, technological advancements, are from people like that, with that creative desire. That it's more than a desire, it's a passion. We've already mentioned it. But when you think of all the innovations over history, from the wheel to automobiles to electronics to computers to GPS systems, all of these things are from passionate people. It's not from some guy you hire and say, okay, sit in this room and make something work for me. Yeah. You've got to have it, that creative spark that just drives you forward against all odds.
Yes.
It's the
when
Henry
people
Ford.
would say, you're crazy. You should get yourself a good solid job and bring home a paycheck.
Yeah.
Good enough.
It's the Henry Ford thing. It's like the old adage where it's like if you ask Henry Ford, or if you ask people what they wanted, they'd say a faster horse, but Henry Ford gave him a car. And it was like that whole thing. He was passionate about this thing.
Yeah.
He wanted to create
Henry Ford, Steve Jobs, all these guys, where it's like, if I ask you what you want, you're going to say something stupid.
Right.
But somebody that could think far enough ahead like that. And to me, in a small way, that's what the fix was. Like, if you ask people, especially 10 years ago or 8 years ago, if like what they would want, it'd probably been what I said. Oh, if we could have the Remington 700 have a folding stock and lose a pound and a detachable mag, it would be perfect. It's like, no, that's stupid. And that was where my brain was. So it's like you have a team, when you write, it's probably maybe a solitary process where you thing and you write out the story. And, what I find here is Ethan is brilliant. He's probably the smartest person I know. He's in charge of special projects and everything here, an engineer. And Nick Schaefer, who you built your gun with, who is the lead designer on the fix, he's brilliant. Mitch, who's doing the boombox right now, brilliant. Drew, we have so many brilliant engineers, but collectively, they are incredible, and it's that process we have here where other gun companies I've seen, they'll give a gun to an engineer like yourself, like you're doing a solitary thing, and they'll have people to support them, and they design the whole gun. We had 6 people design the fixed rifle, and it's interesting watching them. Like, there isn't jealousy. Nobody, they'll get passionate and argue, but it's when they think, not that they want the credit, but a problem that we have to solve with the fix or with the boombox. Their way is right, and I love that competition. It makes those guys better. Sure. And we end up with a product that none of them could do on their own.
And the forward thinking is the key. Like, I remember even, 2019, when I first started at Q, I remember people talking about the fix, the average person saying like, oh, it's a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. But you look 5 years ahead, look at all the other companies that are doing something similar or whatever. Like,
well, everybody said that about 300 Blackout when I
right.
did it. And no ammo company. I mean, Jason Horney told me it would never be successful. He would make the ammo for me for the military or whatever, but he's like, we'll never make this. The commercial market doesn't want this.
Weird.
And Remington owned my company, wouldn't even make our ammo.
You're right, yeah.
They all told me, like, Remington Ammo, laughed at me, told me what an idiot I was. That would never be successful. And I'm like, well, maybe, but like, what do I get for this? I don't make ammo. I get $0 for developing 300 Blackout.
Right.
But I think you're wrong. The military asked us actually to do it. The U.S. SOCOM group did. And we did it. And I would have done it for them anyway, because this is like, prime war, and, our guys are going after all the bad guys.
Right.
I'd do anything to support those guys. So, okay, I'll look at it. But after a couple of weeks of shooting it, and silencers were popular enough in America on the commercial market, I was like, this is the future. This is like the 30-30 lever gun when it came out. This is just the next version of that. And I think that's what's happened. So it is. If you got to play it safe, like guys that are afraid to lose their jobs that make these decisions at companies, that's why they just build an AR and paint it a different color.
Right. Yeah. Well, that 300 Blackout, the AAC you called it initially, right?
Yes,
Same
it was
thing?
Advanced Armament.
Yeah,
That's where we did 300
company name.
Blackout. Yeah.
But when you say, people say, no, who needs that? Well, until you've seen it, tried it, used it, you don't know if you need it. It's never been there before. Never been anything like it before. So innovation requires a little bit of faith and testing down the road, and then suddenly people go, kind of nice to have a short rifle that's quiet, that I can shoot without blasting my ears out. It doesn't weigh 10 pounds.
Isn't it
and
great?
all the other advantages. And at that point, it's like take it or leave it. But now you have an option and you can try it.
Yeah, I mean, you guys remember when the iPhone came out? And I remember
Yes.
there was the early adopters. This is the greatest thing ever. And I was like, didn't care that much. I didn't use a cell phone that much back
Didn't have
then.
one at the time. But.
And there were so many people that hated it because it didn't have buttons. That's never going to last. That's a fad. It's stupid. It doesn't have buttons. Like, man, old Steve Jobs, he was a smart
I remember
fella.
being in junior high thinking like touchscreen. That's weird because all the touchscreens that existed were just like clunky. Like,
Can you imagine us not having them now? When I get in a vehicle and it has like the screen for GPS and it's not a touch screen, like I lose my mind. Like, why would you? What 1970 bullshit is this? It doesn't even make sense not having touch. I'll be looking at magazines like Field Ethos magazine, reading a magazine. I was on the plane, and half the time I'm looking at it, and I got to wear readers now, or I want to see something in the picture, and I'll try to on the magazine. I'm trying to enlarge it. I'm just it's interesting the way it goes.
What's crazy too is, and the touchscreen just made me think about it. And at lunch we talked about it. We were talking about lever guns, and it's like, why are lever guns becoming popular again? Partly legality is a thing. Another thing with that kind of nostalgia, like people think it's cool, but the touchscreen thing reminded me of it. Have you seen they're making flip phones that are touchscreen currently? So it's like we've had the flip phone, we evolved, and now we're going back. It's the same as
What do people not like how big a phone is in your pocket?
it's probably that, but I think they like the novelty of the flipping of the phone. Like it's the same. I forget what it was. It was Amazon or someone a few years ago during the whole like green crisis. Everyone was like, "Look at this new wind powered ship," and everyone's like, "Whoa, sailboats!" Like we've had those.
wind powered
Yeah,
ship.
we're like
Wind-powered ship.
Yeah,
It's green.
yeah.
I love lever guns in this sense. It's like the lever gun is really revolutionary to me, and it still makes a lot of sense for a lot of things. You have a compact, lightweight gun that can hold 10 rounds.
You can shoot fast.
Out of big magazine sticking out. The gun doesn't weigh anything. It's a huge advancement over a lot of like AR-10s and stuff that are built today, in my opinion.
100%.
It's like I can have a 5-pound gun that holds 10 rounds that's slim and ergonomics are great on them. Lever gun it's cool. If you think about for a carbine style gun, at a closer distance, like a bolt gun or a lever gun,
Lever gun.
you shoot a lever gun fast.
Yeah.
I'll throw a curveball at you. Slide action.
I just was about to say slide action,
yeah.
7600 or 760 or
As,
whatever.
as much as I
Or the
love
old
lever,
Colt
lever,
Lightnings and stuff.
I think for me, lever actions are because there's more to do with it. It's like driving an auto or a stick shift in a car.
correct.
Yeah.
You want to be in control
You're
and be a part
involved
of the
in the gun,
operation.
yeah.
And you want to move that thing. So the lever is wonderful. Plus, we've got the nostalgia of the cowboy age and all that good stuff. The slide action's never really caught on with the cowboy mystique.
No.
But when you use one and you've got the same slim profile and that long tube magazine underneath, everything else is there. It's just the functional
It's more
operation of
intuitive
it.
and
You've got
ergonomic
that-
than a lever gun.
Yeah. You're staying with your sight picture.
Yeah.
Your bullets going down your barrel this way, your action's coming back along the barrel,
Makes a lot of
forward
sense.
again. You don't get that back and forth. It's a little bit slicker if you work at it.
You just reminded me. You know what I have a collection of, speaking of that? You remember the IMI Timberwolves? It's a slide action made by Israeli Military Industries in 357, and then they had a 44 Magnum.
Yep.
And it was a takedown gun. I forgot. I've got a bunch of those things. So you could find them for like $300, and they're like $1,500. But that is a cool gun, and it was so weird that it was made by IMI. I don't even know the whole story on it, but they were 10 rounds of 357 or 10 rounds of 44 mag. You've shot something with that 44. It's lightweight.
I don't know so much about the Midwest or even West, but I talking about slide action. I do know, at least in Maine, up north, all the big woods hunters up there. Even to this day, I know guys that are my age or younger that are going out buying Remington 760s or 7600s, cutting the barrel down, putting tracker sights on them. That's all they use
for
up
a
there.
brush gun, that would be great.
Yeah.
It is interesting. Like that's probably a pretty good gun. And their 7600 was the auto.
No, that's 74.
That's the
7400.
Yeah.
That thing I
40.
think is maybe not awesome.
Yeah,
but the pump was
Yeah.
it's good.
And I mean, I have a book. I forget who wrote it. I think it's called The American Deer Hunter. It's from 1953, talking about your different actions, and the pinnacle was the slide action. You know, it was like bolt action's reliable. That slide action's fast. Like you said, you're in your sight picture. You're moving in that linear fashion.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, it is interesting to me when I see a slide action or pump action rifle. It doesn't strike my fancy. I get it. But I'm like, nah, I'd rather have a.
Yeah, they just don't have a look.
Yeah, that'd be
the
cool.
way the lever does. The
Right.
lever gun just has.
It
something
is very
Such an
sexy.
iconic
Like a nice
silhouette.
lever gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've got a bunch of old Winchesters and stuff that have Maxim silencers on them, and when you look at and some of them are 100 and something years old now, and I look at those old Winchesters with that Maxim silencer, I'm like, that I would rather look at that gun than any gun in my collection.
So
It's the
cool.
sexiest gun. Like, it's so nice.
When I first saw the 94, the classic,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I can't get any better. And the only time I've seen it get better is the 1895, like Teddy Roosevelt's big medicine gun, with the angled magazine. Like to me, that's the perfect gun.
You like that, huh?
I love it so
See,
much.
when I was a kid, it was just the opposite. It was like, that's
It's
weird.
ugly.
It's
Yeah.
like when the Glock came out. It's like, oh, those things are never going to sell.
For some
How ugly
reason,
that
it's just
is.
it's awesome. I also have a bunch of 405 and don't have the gun to go with
You
it.
do.
So.
Well, Ben gave me one of the Japan. The
The Moroku ones?
Is that who it is? Morocco?
Yeah.
My buddy Ben gave
Really?
me one about 2 years ago in 405 because I was telling him like that's kind of those
Big
stories
medicine.
inspired me to go to Africa.
Yeah.
And he gave me one. I just exported it to South Africa, actually.
Really?
So everybody that comes over now, I'm going to make
You're
it
out of luck. bud.
Yes.
Almost had one.
I'll bring
the
405.
405. Hornady did hook me up with some that they had.
I've got old stuff.
So this is like the new Hornady stuff, but I'm going to make everyone that, like everybody that I know that comes over there, shoot something with it.
So cool.
And what I want to do, so it's not exactly what you do, but the idea of telling a story, have this gun tell a story over the next 20 years.
Oh, that's cool.
Like a leather bound
So
book, and I'm
cool.
going to take a photo. Everybody that's comes over there with me has to shoot something with it. Take a photo of their animal with it, and the date
cool
and all
one.
the stuff. And in 10 years, who will have all that.
Well, based on they're just the company and you, the people, all the people that through all of us know, like the names that are going to be in that book, the people you look through that book, you're like, it's going to be like the Abercrombie and Fitch book. You're going to have your Hemingways, you're going to have your Roosevelts in there. It's going to be crazy. That
That
book.
would be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are you still as passionate about the storytelling?
I think I am in a slightly different venue, obviously, YouTube.
Yeah, you got a big YouTube channel.
Yeah. I don't write for the magazines as much, partly because they've kind of gone away. There's not as many around anymore, but also because I just seem to reach a broader audience with a YouTube channel and the podcasts that I do and stuff. And I get to say what I want to say, not what the publisher wants to say.
Control. That's just freedom you didn't have before.
Similar to what you're doing with your business. You want to do your own thing. I can do that with the YouTube. I can voice
That's
my opinion
wonderful.
without worrying about the corporate board kicking
I never
me off.
realized how much control
Yeah,
that
all
they
you can
actually
do is use
have.
a sponsor. Big deal.
Yeah, I just never. There's a writer. I won't out the publication, but there's a writer that did a couple years ago that reached out to us about getting a hold of a fix, and he did a comparison between the fix versus Sig's Cross, and the fix, in his opinion, in his article, won of this competition that he did. When he submitted it, they said, we can't, Sig pays a bunch of money to this publication. We can't put that out.
Well,
Like-
Sig spends more in
Advertising
advertising than we
dollars,
do
yeah.
in revenue every
Right.
year. So.
Yeah. But I never thought about that. I always,
learned
for
that
some
25
reason,
years ago when they used to do silencer comparisons
Right.
and Phil Dater at Gym Tech. It was Guns and Weapons for Law Enforcement, Harris Publications, when they were still around. So they would do a silencer article. So they did 8 issues a year of that, and they would do a silencer article in every one. And it was always comparison articles, but when we beat them in the thing, they stopped doing them because he complained and threatened to pull the average. And it's like what a disservice to the consumer. It's funny because like me having the reputation for such an asshole, it's like at least you see it, and I'm not going behind the scenes
Right.
sabotaging, the customers.
Right.
Like I value the customers, and they should get to see that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's what a disservice to them.
it is.
So when you do it yourself and you're on YouTube, that's pretty great. You have a podcast, and what's your YouTube channel called?
Ron Spomer Outdoors. I hung it on my name because it'd been out there in the magazines for years and years, and people already had an inkling of it. And then I was doing a few TV shows back in the era when hunting TV was big, so a lot of people knew me there. So I thought I might as well just bank on my name for a little bit to get started. Of course, you look at it now and you say, well, someday I'm going to quit and sell this company. Who's going to buy Ron Spomer Outdoors? Because they're not Ron Spomer. It's gonna be, right. Of course, AI might fix all of that.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're maybe I could forever on YouTube at least.
Better than Teddy Roosevelt.
It's funny though, saying like, your name had already, you kind of had established that. I could show you I haven't opened it yet. I have a DM from Mike Presswood. He kills a bunch of stuff.
He's in Texas or somewhere.
And I talk to him every now and again, and I said that you were going to be here today, and the DM that I have from him just says Ron Spomer at Q. Holy shit! Like, like he's super excited because I think it is kind of a merging of two worlds.
Two worlds collide.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So
well, it is interesting. I mean, the way. I don't know, with all the forums and all the online stuff, and it's people would assume probably that I only like our guns, you know, or whatever. That's what it is. But, any of you that know me and see the collection, and it's like I've got guns that are 150 years old that I cherish just like modern stuff. I
don't know anyone else who has any Maxim silencers, and I've seen all your Maxim silencers.
Yeah, and also, all the stuff. Like, I love firearms, so when someone's passionate about it or whatever, like, I can connect with them because it doesn't matter if you're only into lever guns or you're into World War I stuff or you're into modern stuff. Like, I just love it all. Yeah. Wheel guns, you name it. Like, I just love it.
Yeah, that's a good attitude. There's a lot of guys who will comment if I write about something that's a little bit out of my wheelhouse and they don't expect it. Like, what are you going over to the dark side, Ron? What's going on here?
Why can't you like it all?
Right.
Yeah, it's like it's a free country, guys, for a little bit yet anyway.
Right, yeah.
Right? And enjoy it. Nobody's forcing you to do this. Nobody wants you to insist that you take this particular rifle or that one or that style of action. You get to do whatever you want, so don't run anybody down. I don't understand the guys who say, I hope that falls on its face because the 30-06 is all we ever needed, so why do we even bother with this new stuff?
That's true, but the 30-06 is all we ever needed.
See what I mean?
Yeah, but you know what's interesting? What I think, just the ignorance of people being that way. It's like, of course, you have the things that you favor the most, and it generally sparks your interest. But you don't want people who, just like ARs, talking about ARs, like someone that their passion is something else. Your perspective, you're an open-minded guy, so okay, this is traditional. This wouldn't be something I would typically go buy, whatever. But you use it, shoot it, talk to the engineers about it, and then what's your impression from that perspective? Because I'm always just going to have my perspective of this. Right. I love seeing someone else's perspective that is open-minded and knows a lot about guns, that has experience. I'm excited when I saw because I'd seen your name in magazines and stuff, but the first video of yours, I saw it popped up in my YouTube feed. I usually watch about a half-hour YouTube before I go to bed every night. And yours popped up because of like the 8.6 Blackout. Is this? And I love the what do you call it? Like clickbait, where it's like the weakest 338 cartridge. And first I was like, that son of a bitch. But then I'm like, okay, this guy knows stuff. I know he does. And what's his perspective going to be? And then, you did a great job in the video. It was interesting because so many of them now, I mean, oh my Lord, you see like the YouTube gun stuff, like most of it's younger guys that don't know anything. They got about 1 year experience and there's nothing technical. They don't have any actual experience using this stuff. And it's like regurgitated Tom Taylor marketing stuff from SIG. I'm just like, Jesus, man. Like, why are you on here if you don't have some opinion that you formulated yourself based on an experience? Yeah. So, I loved it. And the comparison of the different cartridges and just your attitude about it. Because I get when we did something so radical, it's like short barrel, 1 in 3 twist. Here's what we're doing. And the number of times that people have messaged me or I see in forums, Kevin Bringham's an idiot. There is no, the muzzle energy doesn't involve, the the rotational velocity. It's like, every caliber, gun, so a 30-06 from every manufacturer throughout history has been the same twist. That's why you don't calculate it because it's not a variable, you know. And now we're making it one, so it actually does have an effect on target.
In layman's, like you asked Nick earlier about some fast twist stuff, and he gave you a very smart answer. He gave you very intelligent. Here's the math on it and the XYZ. But for the average person, you have to stop this projectile not only from going forward and back, but it's spinning real fast inside of you, and you need it to stop. So like that's where you're getting. You have to. It's energy. It's more energy. I don't understand how it doesn't compute.
Well, it's not
to
creating
people.
more, but it is in a different way.
Right.
Like if you can, but yeah, if we're limited by linear velocity, what can we do to put energy into the animal and increase performance?
Yeah, the same energy is in the bullet, whether it's forward progression or rotation.
Yeah.
The energy's there. How do we translate that to tissue damage?
Right.
Because traditionally it's been everything is, well, linear velocity, long barrels, that's how you get performance with the bullet. Well, what if we want short barrels? What would you do? Because then you're limited by linear velocity. There's some cool stuff like SIG. That's cool. Their hybrid case where you can bump the PSI,
pressure
100,000 up, go to 100,000 instead of 60,000. Like, well, that's cool. Okay, so now we can get incredible linear velocity from short barrels. But what if you don't want to do that? How can you spinning the bullet fast? And I think an interesting thing for us is like never claim to know everything, but I'm generally very transparent with the stuff. And like Ethan didn't think up fast twist, and we laughed that no one, Stoner or Browning or no one that's been brilliant in the past has tried this or thought of it. But we started spinning bullets really fast when the military wanted 300 Blackout subsonic, and they wanted to have 2 MOA so shoot a 2-inch group at 100 yards. And we knew a long rifle bullet going slow, we had to spin it fast. So that's when we started chasing fast twist. And then it just happened. We end up getting faster and faster. And so it's like, okay, well, now we got to test the supersonic bullet because, of course, ammo engineer would be like, the bullet's going to come apart out of the muzzle. And it's like, what RPM does that bullet come apart? Well, he didn't really have an answer. So it's like, well, have you shot it spinning it that fast? Well, no. Well, why don't we just shoot it and see what happens, man? And so, it's fine, actually. We're shooting 1 MOA. Well, we got to shoot. Let's see with gel what happens. Oh, my Lord, spinning the bullet that much faster, turning the RPMs at the initial wound cavity looks like a 300 Win Mag.
Yeah, it's insane.
That's how we're killing stuff with fast twist out of short barrels, and things that we're still learning. So that's like we started learning it on accident just by chasing one thing. Then we see a gel test. We're like, I wonder if that translates into an animal. I'll show you a picture in a second. The first thing I ever shot with 300 Blackout. And then, so we show people this, just like showing them along the way, everything that we're learning. And, so it's not like smoke and mirrors. Like, here's how it happened.
Thought about it. I talked to Dave Stark recently at Discrete Ballistics, and he was telling me about a certain projectile, and he didn't have enough data on it yet. And he's like, this round is designed for 338. It's designed to open up at 2,400 feet per second. And he's like, but that's out of an 18-inch barrel or 20-inch barrel. He's like, if it's out of a 12-inch, what are we going to get for linear velocities? Like, I'm not sure, but it's spinning at 500,000 RPM. So he's like, it should equate this and that. Like,
a thing that I really just learned on this last hunt, or maybe the one before, so within the last year, because a lot of the bullets that expand when you put it into an animal, it'll penetrate some distance, depending on what the linear velocity is on target. 3 inches, 6 inches, 8 inches before you really get expansion. What we're seeing with really fast twist is it's like a mechanical broadhead. It's expanding on impact. So that's even increasing the performance, terminal effect on the animals.
Question I have, thinking about the rotation, I'm always thinking, how are you getting the rotational energy into the animal if the bullet isn't any wider? So expansion has got to be a critical part of this. And I've seen some of those radical copper bullets you've got with the really long petals on it, like Barnes X ×2 for pedal length. To me, that's taking advantage of the buzzsaw effect. You're reaching farther out from the bullet's trajectory path and touching more tissue.
Yes. So you're creating a bigger wound channel in general.
Yeah. It's like a blender blade.
All right.
Also, a way that I've explained it to people, it's like, the average adult male 15 inches here to here. So if I shoot you with a 1 in 10 twist and it best you're going to get 1.5, but in reality, the bullet's not expanding until it's several inches in you, so you get one rotation. So, but with fast twist, if that thing is
3-4 rotations,
1 in 3 twist, you're getting 5 rotations. So if you follow like the cutting surface in there, if you took that and you extended it out, like it's much longer than it is with a slower twist. So you're getting more arterial damage. You're getting, more cutting surface too, even with the same diameter. So there's like all these things about it people have never thought of because it's like never been a consideration.
One thing. I'm sorry, you go.
Well, I was just going to say where we need to go with most of the folks that are commenting on my stuff is, what about too fast a twist? Is it going to make my rifle inaccurate because it's too fast, and all my bullets going to fly apart? Because these are the two old wives' tales that have been out there for decades.
It's true, and there will, depending on a bullet, there will be an optimum. Well, it's like everything else. Are you chasing accuracy or are you chasing performance? Because what we've seen, like with one bullet, for instance, with a 1 in 3 twist, we shoot, at 300 meters, we're shooting 1 MOA, we're shooting 3 inches. With a 1 in 5 twist, we're shooting, 2.8 MOA. Or 0.8 MOA.
0.8 MOA. You're getting better accuracy.
Yeah, so you can get a little better, but you lose terminal performance. But what we're finding is that's just with some bullet designs.
Right.
With some bullet designs, that's not the case. And then a thing that could hurt super fast twists, it's a reality. If your bullet if you have any defects in the bullets and stuff like that, when you get to a certain rotational velocity, then that, well, it won't necessarily blow up, but you won't shoot. That can be a reason that the bullets don't shoot as well as they will on a slower twist. So we're learning lots of things. Overall, for 99% of use case, I would rather have a 1 in 3 twist and 8.6 Blackout than a 1 in 5 twist. And 1 in 5 is way better than 1 in 7 or 1 in 10 because I like the performance on target. And if people are honest about it, like, if we're talking like 0.2 mils, worst case scenario difference. Like, is that going to make a difference? Like, are you really shooting animals at 700 yards, or have you never shot anything past 250 yards? I think for all of it, there's going to be some give and take. But no, the only bullets that we've had come apart are spinning 1 in 3 or faster, and out of like a 16-inch barrel to where the RPMs are really high, and it's non-bonded bullets. But bullets that we thought would come apart out of the muzzle, so you think like the Hornady Sub-X bullet and 8.6 or in 300 Blackout. That is the thinnest copper jacket, I think, on any bullet. It's just a lead slug. And the way theirs works, it doesn't expand. The bullet just deforms enough. And when you spin it fast, it creates a great wound channel. And those bullets are actually very effective on target, but they don't look impressive when they come out of the gel. You get great penetration, but even those 10,000 copper jacket at the tip of the bullet, and those don't come apart out of fast twist barrels, even the 1 in 3. Any off the shelf, and why we stopped at 1 in 3, if you go to 1 in 2 twist with 8.6, with supersonic, you're going to have specially designed bullets, which would be fine for like the military or whatever. But we stopped at 1 in 3 because all the Barnes bullets hold together and perform beautifully. They don't come apart out of the muzzle. All of the Hornady bonded bullets from Federal and everyone else stay together. The Hornady CX bullets and GMX bullets are fine. And we were surprised. We thought even at 1 in 3, more bullets would expand. But supersonic, I thought we would start to see degradation in the accuracy, and
we're not seeing it. Great.
So
it's very interesting to me how many people don't realize that there have been faster twists. There was a video, I was scrolling through Facebook recently, there was like a sponsored ad for something, and it was footage of a 1 in 1 twist, and it was Ethan David and I forget his name, not Brad, but I forget the guy's name, but it was their footage. It's gel, it's a 1 in 1 going through gel, and it was slow-mo. And I saw the footage, and when I saw that it said 1 in 1, I was like, oh, I know the guys who did this, so I want to see the comments. So I looked at the comments, and there were people being in there being like, this isn't real, this is AI, like you can't spin a bullet faster than 1 in 6. They've never done it. And people were like, I have a 1 in 3 8.6 barrel. Like, what are you talking about?
6, most of the old, like whoever that is that makes all the older, button rifle, like most of them won't go faster than a 1 in, like you can't gear them faster than 1 in 6, and that's kind of why it stopped there. Like what we found, we've tested down to 1 in 1 is that would be a subsonic only, and you will get significant spin drift beyond 100 yards. But, the thing is, you think about that. So why would you ever want it? Well, it's real effective on target.
Yeah.
But you even think about a Glock pistol barrel, 9mm. Why don't you spin that bullet really fast? Like, you're not shooting a pistol, like if you're using it for,
True,
defensive reasons.
That's 7 meters and in or whatever.
Spin drift isn't going to matter, but it'll give you much better performance.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too, and maybe it's only in my experience, and it's probably anecdotal, but I'm sure there's some science behind it. But I shot a couple animals where the first time it happened to me, I shot a whitetail and had passed through with a 12-inch 8.6. I was shooting supers, and then I noticed it on some pigs too. While I was checking, I wanted to see if it was similar, and there was a time where I thought the round didn't expand properly, and with the whitetail specifically, I looked in. I mean, I saw the entrance exit. When we end up dressing it, we skinned it, and I looked, and that, I think it's science, but for me, it's purely anecdotal. But that fast twist, even though the round didn't necessarily expand like we saw those grappling hook rounds expand, the hydrostatic shock, you could tell. I mean, the whole right side of the animal was just all hematoma. Like, you could see the hydrostatic shock is a real thing. So it's almost like insurance. If the round doesn't necessarily expand the way that it should, you might get that rotational energy might be having your back a little bit.
Well, you get better penetration with it. You don't get as much drop with fast twist, but you do get spin drift faster. Still,
but that's a constant though. That's a control. Like, it's something you can measure.
So, Ron, this is in Texas. This is the first animal I ever shot with 8.6. It was I don't even remember now, 12 or 16-inch barrel, Barnes 210 bullet, supersonic. So just their TSX, their non-tip bullet. 50 yards broadside, and that's the exit.
I remember when this happened.
There's a significant wound here.
Yes, there is a large wound.
I've never seen a wound that dramatic on a deer.
And that's just a scrawny doe.
It's just a doe.
It's not all that wide through the chest.
No.
Was that shot right behind the shoulder, came out in front, or was it just
It was through the other shoulder.
Through the other shoulder, exited here.
Yes.
That's
and
massive.
that's something that I had never seen before. So a buddy of mine was there with me, right behind me. And so we'll post that up now. Yeah, I've never seen a wound. It looks like she was hit by a car.
Yeah.
And so I didn't touch it. When I walked up to it, that's how she was, and I took the photo. But it was broadside, and she did a barrel roll it seemed like fake physics. Like something you would see in a movie, like when Jackie Chan kicks you or something. She did a barrel roll and slammed on the ground. I saw that leg flop over like that. And I was like, and I look at my buddy I was with, Matt Gomez.
Matt Gomez, yeah.
And it's like, did you see that? He's like, what? I mean, you look like Jet Li or something in a movie, like choreographed.
Yeah.
And we got over there, I saw that wound, and I'd shot a lot of deer by that time and culled a lot of my property and stuff. And it's like, there's like 8 bones sticking out of that wound. Yeah.
And we've seen it with, we've posted the video of the kudu getting hit in the chest and shoving it backwards. And I think Amy Johnson shot, was it a Nyala or something that started doing karate?
Yeah. Flipped over backwards.
Yeah.
It's because I've tested a lot of bullets from different manufacturers going to Africa the last few years. And I've shot hundreds of animals with 8.6 with super and subsonic now. And I can tell especially with supersonic ammo, instantly if the bullet didn't expand. Because one thing we can do, bullets don't have to be as weak to expand. There's always a problem with like Barnes bullets years ago. The window of velocity for proper expansion is very small. With fast twist, the bullets expand much easier. So that gives you a much broader window of velocity. Another great thing with subsonic rifle bullets is they don't slow down. Like the linear velocity, they don't really slow down. Like if it's 1,050 at the muzzle, at 1,000 yards, it's still like 875.
Wow.
So in rotational velocity, that rate of decay is even less than linear velocity. So the bullet's still spinning. If it's 500,000 RPMs at the muzzle, at 1,000 yards, I have no idea, but I would bet it's still over 400,000 RPMs. Wow. So, it's like an arrow. It doesn't, as long as you hit the target, it's going to perform. So you're not relying on bullet, the deformation of the bullet just based on linear velocity. Because 16-inch. Think about this. My 12-inch 8.6. We were in Wyoming, and I was doing 1,000-yard testing.
Yep.
The subsonic 8.6 was faster at 900 yards than supersonic 308 out of a 16-inch barrel.
Yeah, insane.
So 308 out of a 16-inch barrel, basically, no matter what bullet you're shooting, at past whatever distance, depending on the bullet, but 600 yards, it's just a ball round.
And
you're not going to get expansion.
With that same setup, realistically, probably able to keep a tighter group with that, because that 308's for sure going transonic. So it's going to start doing weird stuff after that. Yeah. After that. So, I mean
you would never shoot a subsonic.
No, of course.
At 1,000 yards. But it's interesting when you start doing all this testing, what you learn.
Well, then hearing the engineers saying too, like out of the 12-inch, or maybe it was the 8-inch, but the subsonics having more energy on target than like a 45 point blank at 600 yards.
Yeah, because they don't slow down. They don't really lose the energy.
Right.
I mean, they're still spinning and going just as fast.
But for the average person to hear that, like a quantifiable, like, hey, your grandfather's 1911, that you shoot point blank, like this has more energy at 600 and it's subsonic. Like that's for a lot of people are like, well, that's insane.
Yeah, I think this, maybe not. I think this really changes hunting, the 8.6 with a short barrel, and maybe not in some places like out west, where you're on prairie or where you're from, but everywhere in the East Coast where all your shots are inside 300 yards. Now you got a gun that's as quiet as a Silence 22. You have a 350 grain expanding bullet.
And it weighs 5 pounds.
It weighs 5 pounds.
Yeah, it's a whole new dynamic. It's going to take, I think, a few years at least for the general public to buy into it, because we've have generations familiar with traditional rifles.
Sure.
And it's hard to get past that. Not that everybody has to get past it, but I do think as we started with this broadcast talking about keeping an open mind and actually testing things and not just assuming, oh, that's never going to work. You fast twist, that's crazy. Not if it works. Not too crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the proof's just in the performance. I mean,
One thing I'm interested in is, and we focus a lot because it's so interesting and it's so new. We focus a lot on the subsonic aspect, and because when you see it in action, it's amazing. You're like, well, this is insane. Taking these huge animals with such a quiet, small gun. But I'm really interested to see, as time goes on, people making supersonic, like high BC supersonic bullets, and designed specifically for 8.6. Obviously, right now we have 338 bullets that we're using, and I'm curious to see people design it around that short package, that fast twist, to see what they can come up with. Because the idea of a 12-inch gun that's super light, that can be a mountain gun or a prairie, like you can go shoot those 500, 600, 7-yard shots with it. That's super interesting to me. A super small package that's a 600, 700-yard deer gun, pretty cool. And we don't focus on it super heavy right now because, subsonic is super interesting, but I'm curious to see how
the
it goes.
programs, like the military programs right now are all kind of based on subsonic. So how did you say, are you in Idaho now?
Yeah.
How did you get there from South Dakota? What happened?
Well, I wanted to get out into elk country.
Oh, yeah.
Sheep, mountain goats, all the stuff. You grow up hunting pheasants and a few whitetail and pronghorn now and then in South Dakota, and lots of waterfowl and native grouse, and it was a great place, still is. But you don't get the big elk, and you don't get mountain sheep and goats and all the rest of the western stuff.
So it really was going out west just to pursue your passion for hunting.
I'm a writer. I can live anywhere.
That's right.
My office is wherever I'm sitting with my typewriter at the time.
Hemingway you went to Cuba,
Yeah. Couldn't find Hemingway, so I came home. Yeah. But I moved out there just to be out in the West and do all my things, and it didn't take long, and I was hunting elk and getting my sheep and going up to Alaska, and pretty soon it's just everywhere. Really? But I still enjoy the mountain states. This country, to me, New Hampshire, the North, too much forest. Yes. I enjoy forests, and I can enjoy them for a time.
Claustrophobic.
It's a little tight
exactly,
up here.
Exactly.
See, it's comforting to me because I'm from this area.
Yeah.
So when I go out in the desert,
that.
I love it. It's beautiful, but I'm like, something subtle about all the thick greenery.
For me, I'm like, it's so vast. Like, Africa wasn't what I expected. It's all these so vast, these hills, and I'm just like, oh man. I'm like, where are we going to find anything? Yeah. Here, it's like you trip over a deer sometimes. It's so tight, they don't know, but out there, it's
So you love it out there.
Yeah, I'm never going to leave the mountains now. We live at over 5,000 feet. So,
Jeez.
yeah.
So you love the sheep hunting.
Oh, I did for a long time when I was really, really fit. You know?
Was that a Jack O'Connor thing? Did that get you like inspired?
Yeah, sure. That was certainly a part of it, but it was just my overall interest and love in all wildlife. And if you grow up reading the hunting magazines from North America with O'Connor and all the rest of them, you want to you want to go to Alaska. You want to do the Jack London thing.
Yeah.
And sheep, moose, grizzly bears, caribou, all that exciting stuff. And then pretty soon you want to go to Africa and see what's there. And you just move on from that because it's the passion, I think, for me is always the hunt. Was the wildlife, the animals.
Yes.
All of it. I was always interested in wildlife of all kinds and pursuing them. I equate hunting with bird watching and butterflies.
Yeah.
People can relate to, butterflies are so beautiful. Oh, I love to capture them and pin them up. Well, that's killing them. So now we're just going to identify them and photograph them. Same with birds. They start off shooting them and mounting them, and then they go to egg collecting. And it's just all part of the human wanting to be in contact with his natural world. Yeah. This is who we are. This is where we are. Hunting is just another one of the aspects of it, how you enjoy it. So whatever takes me into the wilds, whether it's fly rotting for trout or canoeing just to explore a river, camping in the wilderness, all of that stuff, that mountain man thing, I think is inherent in so many of us. Some people have no interest at all. Others are just passionate for it.
Yeah, that's so insightful because it is interesting. You grew up around it. I didn't. Yeah. But I instantly felt a connection because, my interest in Africa was a couple of things. It was Hemingway and it was Roosevelt, like those stories that I saw. And then some of it was my fear of America screwing up so many things, including Africa. It's like, elephants endangered, you shouldn't shoot those. Like all this ignorance that they impose on Africa. And I was actually afraid that especially a lot of the dangerous game, like wild Africa hunting, which I'm very passionate about right now, and I felt a sense of urgency to do it for a couple of reasons. It's like, well, if I wait, the traditional thing, like I should just work hard at this company when I'm 65, 70, whatever the age is. I'm going to have all this money. I'll sell the company, and then I go on these adventures. It's like, well, man, wasn't fit enough at 45 to do it. And so part of it was that I want to, because it's like my job, just like your job. We're so fortunate. I can do my job until my brain stops working. Like I'm not a pro athlete, so I don't have a shelf life in that regard. And it's like I don't ever want to stop working. So why would I not just start like early retirement in the sense of I'm going to work part-time the rest of my life rather than work full-time for another 20 years and then try to go do this. And then politically, with America sticking their fingers in everything, we're going to screw up wild Africa hunting, and I'm not going to be able to hunt dangerous game in wild Africa. And it's, eventually you're only going to be able to do canned hunts or something like that to do, and it'll be all controlled. And like, I want to fly, I want to be a 20-hour drive from a town and in wild Africa and hunt there, hunt elephant there, hunt lion there, like all the stuff, I want to hunt crocodiles like the Zambezi, that's the stuff I want to do. And you might not be able to do it in 10 or 20 years from now for some reason.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell a lot of young guys that. They'll sometimes ask, gosh, should I go to Africa first or Alaska first? I think I want to go to Alaska because it's more familiar.
Sure.
And I usually tell them, no, I would go to Africa first because you could lose it just like that.
Yeah.
See, I agree with you 100%. I would have said what you said about Alaska, and I understand that. And I've traveled a lot, fortunately, though, but Africa, my fear was I felt a sense of urgency and I felt anxiety that I need to go do these things now because, even when Trump was in office, they stopped the importation because of his daughter or whatever about the elephants, and you couldn't bring them in from Botswana. There's 80,000 elephants or something in Botswana they need to shoot.
Yeah.
And like Americans overall don't understand it. It's like, okay, that's how all the animals disappear. We only have elephants in this area and it's overpopulated. They destroy everything, and now there's no kudu, there's no leopard, there's no anything else.
That's something that we could talk about it for hours, but Steve Rinella, for whether people like him or not, had he was challenged one time by like a vegan that was very anti-hunting and X, Y, and Z. And it was at it might've been at his book signing, at Rinella's book signing or something. And Steve challenged him back and said, I guarantee you, like, I understand where you're coming from, and you're coming from this good place of like, oh, animals are beautiful and we should say whatever. But he's like, I promise you that I, as well as every hunter I know, knows more about these animals and cares more about these animals than you do. Because like you said,
that's ignorant to it. It's hard. And it makes sense. When I was young, I would have thought the same thing. It's hard to understand if you love animals, then you could never kill one. It's like, hey, yeah. I mean, if we didn't have hunting, there would be nothing but cattle and sheep and goats in Africa.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like all these stories of elephants and lion and hippo and crocs and kudu, that would all be stuff we would just read about or look at pictures of.
Well, the thing that these sorts of people are missing is an understanding of what makes the world work or how it works, what nature set up. The reality of nature is that you need herbivores and you need carnivores. It's nature's idea to hunt. Mm-hmm. We didn't think it up.
Yeah, we're not the only people that hunt.
No, it was given to us. And, well, but if you kill animals, then they're going to be gone. Well, it didn't wipe them out until that big asteroid landed in the Gulf there several million years ago.
Yeah, we didn't hunt the dinosaurs and do
You're right. There's more animals are extinct than currently are living, according to the fossil record. Right. And they went extinct long before humans showed up.
Yeah, it's interesting because aren't there more people alive than have ever died still?
Yeah, that's another crazy. So that's another reason why we're losing wildlife. Right. You've got so much biomass on this planet. Is it going to be cattle, chickens, and people, or is it going to be elephants and
Mother Nature probably knows more than us. It'll take care of it one way or another if we don't help.
I do believe, and maybe I'm looking at it pessimistically, but I think if you were in an area in this country, if you were to let things go and let nature take its course and basically have this overwhelming amount or too many of one population of animal to where they die out, say it's, through predators or lack of food or whatever, I still think that people would just blame humans for it. Like if we chose a corner of the country, and we're like,
everything's so divisive.
Yeah.
Because
it's like you try to tell people like
idiots.
Right. Because I mean it's like a look at New Zealand, right? With the no natural predators. And it's like you have to intervene.
Well, they didn't have animals. So.
Right, yeah.
They didn't have mammals except for a bat and a seal.
Or Hawaii, same thing, like with the axis. You have to intervene.
Yeah, look at how many, what is it, Lanai? Look at how many axis are there.
Yeah, it's insane.
You got to shoot them.
Yeah. And people don't get that. It doesn't, because they're like, well, it's natural. And it's like, yeah, well, then these animals would naturally eat all of these animals and they wouldn't exist anymore. Like,
I think the salvation for hunters, if people can wrap their heads around it, which isn't really hard to do.
Take someone hunting and educate them.
It's sustainable use. If you love nature and the way the system works that she set up, you can live within that system or you can abandon it and make everything domestic, man-made life forms. Yeah. Domestic crops, domestic livestock. We can live off that. We've been doing it for a long time, and we need to because we have such a big population. But if you can live off of a natural environment using those species without overutilizing them, sustainable use, why would it be wrong to eat an elk instead of a pig? Why would it be wrong to eat an elephant instead of a cow?
Well, it's interesting who gets to decide what animals you can eat.
Right, yeah.
Like who's the person that makes that up?
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Like interesting to a lot of people, that animal's so beautiful. How could you shoot? So we can only shoot ugly animals.
Ones. Right.
And who gets to determine what's ugly? Are we just going to shoot warthogs forever?
And also look at how big and how well they're thriving, these populations of animals that we have right now, because we know directly through the funds from hunters and the conservation that DNR is doing all that. But it's like the average person, you ask them right now, like, are there endangered animals right now? I mean, I'm sure there are, but like you look at these populations.
Yeah, when I post
a
hunting photo, if I post a zebra or an elephant or a lion or anything, just watch the comments. They're all endangered.
Yeah. And it's like
Impala.
The populations are doing so well because we're actively putting money into it. And I mean, realistically, it's kind of it's kind of a weird way to say it, but if you look at Africa specifically, it's a weird way to look at it. But each animal has to pay their way. Like in Africa specifically, like putting a monetary value on the animal is what's keeping it alive over there.
Yeah, if you can hunt, the animal has value. If not, then if you cattle farm, you don't want kudu and stuff on your land.
Right.
Because if you have a kudu, you can't have a cow.
Right.
If you're not hunting the kudu. And then, it makes sense. Like if people be logical, think about it as a business. I own this big ranch and so I hunt. People pay to come hunt there. well, why in the world would you want to shoot all the animals in 1 year? Like, you want it to be sustainable. Because if it's free range hunting, animals don't cost me anything.
Right.
We just have to be responsible about how many of each species we take every year.
Yeah.
Which is the same as cattle. If you're running cattle, you don't kill them all in 1 year and sell them because the price is up. You've got to have breeding stock. That's the
right.
sustainable yield that nature set
People who
up.
have never lived or thought about that, it's like, yeah, it all has a price. It's well, if you have a herd of 100 kudu on this 100,000 acres, then that's 100 cattle you can't have.
Yeah.
Or that's, probably 500 sheep that you can't have, or whatever.
Yeah, whatever the numbers are.
And then too, I think about all these like remote villages where you can hunt wild Africa and there's lions. Okay. Oh, how could you shoot a lion? Any place where there's no hunting in Africa and there were lions, there are no lions. It ain't because they got hunted out by Europeans
Right,
or
yeah.
American. It's well, okay. So if and typically there the natives have cattle and goats and maize, corn. So a herd of elephant come in, they can eat 100 acres of corn in a night, and then okay, so you have a 550-pound lion that lives on near your land,
And it took 3 of your
and
sisters.
they're lazy, real easy to jump the fence and eat a cow every couple of days.
Yeah.
And then too, okay, your kids are going to go down the river, 550-pound cat.
Yeah. Only one of them comes back.
It's like they snare them and kill them all because there's no value. But once you hunt them in those areas, and the villages learn, okay, it employs them. That's one lion will be half the money for the entire village for a year. What they get from it. So now they protect them because that's what helps to feed everyone.
Yeah.
And that sort of stuff. What is so sheep hunting you don't do now?
No, I don't think I've hunted sheep for a good 6 years for sure. I don't know that I'll ever go again. I thought about having a 70-year birthday party Dall sheep hunt up in Alaska, and I did elephant instead.
Yes.
But not in Alaska.
I haven't done the sheep hunting, but I know about it, and I know that's you don't do those on accident. That's a hard.
That's when you're in your 20s and 30s, and I think I probably did my last one at around 60. I think that was about it. I think I did the 60th birthday party Dall sheep hunt.
What's so hard about them?
Gravity. Yeah, it is. It wouldn't be for gravity. It'd be a piece of cake.
Yeah, just float up there and do it.
The magic about it is the wilderness. If you love the whole idea of the mountain man and the wilderness and Jack London's Alaska and all that good stuff, sheep hunting is the epitome of it. You're high. You feel kind of special because you're high. You're looking at some pretty spectacular country, and they are a spectacular animal in and of themselves.
Yeah.
So it's just a completely foreign, I think, for most of us, environment. And spectacular animal in that environment. And also you are going to be bumping into moose and caribou and wolverine and wolf and all those grand species. And it's just adventure all the way around. And then there's the physical challenge of having 50 to 80 pounds on your back and living for a week or two in the wilderness. So you've got that survival aspect. It makes you feel like an accomplished something. You can be, as a guide up there told me once in Alaska, he says, don't worry too much about your waterproof clothing. You can never stay dry. You just don't want to be, you want to be wet but not miserable.
Yeah. You don't want to be thinking about it all.
Yeah. You're going to be damp, but you're not going to be suffering too much.
I just came back from Cameroon, and last year I hunted the savannah and hunted Lord Derby. And that was the most difficult hunt I'd ever been on.
Yeah.
And because I think it was 5 days, like 120, 30 degrees, and we're doing like 10 miles, 15 miles a day.
Ooh.
And 5 days tracking one, I shot it. And it's the happiest I've ever been when I shot that Lord Derby, just so I didn't have to walk another step.
Yeah.
And then, so I went to the forest, the rainforest this year, so on the border with the Congo, and after bongo and forest buffalo. And so I was much more prepared for this and convinced myself it was going to be the most miserable thing in the history of the world. And so that was a good thing to do, and I was more fit this year and more prepared. And it was so enjoyable, and I loved it. And I thought I would never go back. I said I would never go back to Cameroon, and I'm going to go back probably next year for forest elephant. Yeah, it was. I did have you been there? Have you done those hunts? Okay, so with that, you're with the pygmies, and they are incredible people. So there's like the men aren't even 5 feet tall, and they weigh like 85 pounds, and they're all muscle, and so they go in front of you, typically 4 or 5 of them, hacking your way with machetes because like you can't walk through it. It's so thick. It's like triple canopy. You can't see. And it's not like thorns and stuff in South Africa where everything cuts you and pokes you. It's like all the vines and everything in the jungle there in the forest is like fish teeth. So it grabs you and it'll scratch you if you pull your way through it, but it's really strong. Yeah. So it's just irritating. And like the ants are everywhere and you have to cover all your skin the whole time because you don't see the sun, even though it's because it's triple, like it can be pouring rain and you don't even get wet. You're in the bottom. But all the ants there, they bite and sting at the same time. Yeah. So they have like a stinger on it. It's like the worst thing ever. So you have to tuck everything in and try to cover all your skin up.
And they got
so my shirts are ripped and shredded every day. Tsetse flies are the worst thing in the world. So if you're by the rivers hunting, so they're not everywhere in there because they can't really live, I think, in parts of the jungle. But if you're by water, so if you're hunting Sitatunga, like you're just getting, it's like a horsefly times 5 nonstop. And they're just, but that hunt, so they measure it by hours because it's so slow going through the forest because it's just, you're having to, everything. Usually, depending on the time of the year, like 6 hours is all they'll let you do in there. And so in most of the bongo or the buffalo, once you find tracks, are within a couple hours. And you may do, like 2 kilometers. So the bongo was 11 kilometers and the buffalo was 10. And I loved it. But the bongo, these little dogs end up baying it. And I shot the bongo at 5 yards and it's the first instance I could see it.
So all the time you were hunting, you never saw one?
Never.
Until you finally had your shot.
They tracked the same tracks for 11 kilometers through the jungle, and we found it. Yeah.
Wow. So, see, that's why I don't want to go.
So it sounded miserable, but it was. But this was a good miserable. But I think psychologically, too, I was prepared because I'd been on a very difficult hunt. It's like, this is going to be the worst thing I ever do, but it's going to be so rewarding to shoot the thing. So I'm going to suffer through it, and I'm never going back. That was my attitude when I went. But I was convinced it was going to be so terrible. And it wasn't as bad as I thought, but it was horrible. But it was wonderful. It's really difficult to explain. So the dogs eventually. So the dogs, they just do it by like sight and hearing, not really by smell in the jungle. Because it's so thick, you don't even worry about the wind or anything because they can't. It's just thick, they can't smell. But they bay this bongo when we finally get close, and these little bitty crazy wild African dogs that they have there in Cameroon, and so you've got a matter of whatever. Maybe 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute to get to it.
Well, once they start baying, yap, 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 get there.
So get there or it'll bust out of the bay and you're not going to see it. And they had it and all you see is like the jungle and the bush shaking and you hear that thing snorting and running at the dogs. And then all of a sudden they push it and it comes through. So we could see, it's like the movie like Predator.
Yeah.
It's like you see the jungle move and stuff, but you're like, you can't see it. And like I hunt a lot, so it's not like I'm like, and the bongo came through head first, like it's head down at us, and I shot it at 5 yards. And that was the first instance I saw it. And the buffalo was a similar situation. And I had to crawl through this thing, and I'm on like my belly and then on a knee. There was this one little spot you could see into there when the dogs got on it. And it was just kind of the trail into this thicket. And the difficult thing about it is once, like if the buffalo had seen me, like the only way out is in the path.
You're there.
So you have to kill it, or because there is no other way it can run. And so that was 7 yards, and it was the first instance. And I had to crawl down and be under this thing. It's incredible, and it's crazy the way you hunt there. And I don't know how most people do it. And I'm like, oh, there's a reason you don't see like pictures in this area of like 75-year-old guys 100 pounds overweight shooting animals. Like it's just not a thing.
Not good to happen.
But it was exciting. And I thought about it. It was like, if you knew what the Lord Derby hunt were in, Congo or Cameroon, if people really knew, and the bongo hunt, if you gave them the hunts, 90% of people that hunt wouldn't even go.
Yeah,
they knew what it was. That's what and the only thing I think about, the only thing that could be harder would be sheep hunting that I can think of personally.
I don't think it would be. Beyond the gravity, yeah, you're going to have some white Sox flies biting you, a few, and some mosquitoes usually. But usually I would go after a good freeze, so the bug problem was not always there. But that's what scares me about your jungle stuff. 120 degrees and bugs, and they bite.
And you have to be fully covered.
Oh, man.
So, like, you sweat. And even at night, it's so hot.
Yeah.
Like, you sweat as soon as you get out of the shower. The whole time you're sleeping on top of the covers naked, you're sweating.
Yeah.
Like, that part, but, that's the part, like, psychologically, it's just miserable. Like, I don't want to sweat when I sleep.
Yeah.
But it was interesting, and, God, it was fun, and it was exciting, and I cannot wait to go back for elephant there. Because, it's like, as a person, you can't even walk through it, and then there's elephants are in there. It's like, how is that a thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think if there were elephants there, you could follow their trails. They would have broken the brush a little bit for you, but it just springs right back or something.
Yeah, you think about those animals too with horns. They got these 30-inch horns on their heads, and they just are so familiar with, like a bongo. Yeah, they're so familiar with their horns, their anatomy, that they're still making it through this.
When they go through the bush and all, when he came through, as his head was completely
back,
and his horns were on his back when I shot him.
Yeah.
And like all I had was right here. And shot
It's
him.
like watching an elk go through the
Yeah.
timber. And how do they do that? You got 30, 40-inch wide tips out there, 40 inches behind you, and you're not hitting the end of the branches. You know what the answer is? When they are in velvet, there is a nerve cell at the base of every one of those hairs. So while they're growing, they feel it. Every time they come near something, one of those hairs touches it.
Interesting.
They go, ooh, that's where they are today. And by the time they're full grown and then they shed the velvet, they've got their brain wired to know that. And that's how they can.
Interesting.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's sort of like,
that.
So cool.
It's similar to like cats. Their whiskers are generally the width of their body. So, it's balanced, but the whiskers are generally the width of their body. So they know if they can get into a tight spot. If their whiskers touch, they can't get in.
Evolution and stuff is incredible. It's so wonderful.
Weird.
It's amazing what we all know.
I think it's why, like, probably out, because with kudu, like their predators, like a lion and stuff, there'll be more like big bulls killed than cows and everything. And I think with elk, it's the same thing probably with wolves. Like if they get into some it's probably big bulls that get killed because they're less mobile in, a thicket or something because of the horns. And that's what some PHs told me about kudu. Like we'd find a kudu like that had been killed by cats. And they're like, what's easier actually, like in the forest here, whatever, the bush, to catch the big bull than it is a cow, because they don't have to worry about the horns, so they're just running through stuff where, you see, and same thing with the elk, the maneuvering because of the antlers.
Yeah, I didn't know about elk, but there's always been told to me that mule deer are the number one for mountain lions. They choose selectively the biggest, oldest bucks. And it makes sense because the oldest bucks are usually by themselves, so there's only 2 ears and 2 eyes and 2 nostrils detecting danger. Where the does are usually in a group of 8 to 14, so they're going to detect the predator before it gets there. And then the other thing with the big mule deer bucks is that they're worn down after the rut.
Yeah.
They're a lot more tired, and they just don't have the energy to escape.
Yeah.
Like a 50-year-old after being in Cameroon for
There you go.
go to bed at
Take
7
him out.
o'clock every evening now. That's interesting. What's been your favorite? So you've hunted Africa a fair amount.
Yeah, a fair amount. I've been in 5 southern African countries: Zambia, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Namibia. And I may be looking at going to Botswana this coming year.
That'd be incredible.
Yeah, but I really love Southern Africa.
I do too.
Because of their success story with wildlife. They've done it differently than we have here. North American Model of Wildlife Conservation has been a really successful program. Yeah. Hunters support fish and game agencies. We pay the money for the licenses, all that good stuff. Excise taxes on our firearms and guns and everything, and that's what helps restore wildlife at a public level. Where in Africa, it's private. At least in these southern African countries. Landowner owns the land, he can have his cattle, his livestock, or he can replace them with wildlife. Why would he replace his domestic cattle with wildlife? Because the wildlife brings in more money than the cattle. Yeah. And it also brings in more protein. They've done the studies, and the variety of species that can live in the native habitat on those ranches produces more meat than domestic livestock.
Well, that would make sense because, like, cattle are selective grazers.
Exactly.
What's your favorite country you've hunted in there for hunting?
You know, I have enjoyed all of them. Everyone's a little bit different.
Yeah.
I like Mozambique out in the Zambezi swamps because it's more jungly, kind of the classic Tarzan thing.
Cool. I love Mozambique.
Yeah. And great diversity of game there, doing a great job bringing it back in that country too. But then I like the open country because it's reminiscent of South Dakota, the plain states where I started hunting. And I just like open country, glassing, spot something and then stalk it, that sort of thing. So it's all good. Gosh, I don't know. I really can't pick one over another. Even in North America, people will say, what's your favorite thing to hunt? You know, for a while it was elk. For a while it was sheep. For a while it was whitetails. And then as you grow, change physiologically as well as your interests change with that. These days, I think upland bird hunting is probably number one with me, even though I love rifles more. I just like rifles and what they do.
Yeah.
But when you're rifle hunting big game, you've got a tag, you selectively hunt, and you go bang, and you're done. Well, with your shotgun, the birds get up and you go bang, bang, and you might have a limit of 3 a day or 10 a day for quail or something, and you get to work with your dog and your buddies, and it's more relaxed. You don't have to look for antlers and say, well, gee, if I shoot, the hunt's over.
Right.
No, you can go again the next day. So there's more action, there's more hunting, and I really enjoy that.
That's something that I really like about Africa. You know, if you go out west, you go on an elk hunt, you shoot elk the first day, you're done. You go to Africa, you want to shoot an African elk, a kudu.
Yeah.
You get lucky, you get that in the first couple of days. Well, there's 29 other species of animals that you can hunt. You know, not everything's expensive. Like, go hunt impala, warthog, things that are a few $100.
Yeah.
So that's a part that I really love about it, and just the volume of game that you see in Africa.
Yeah.
But seeing a lot of different species because, in some states you can have elk and mule deer, and you can have a few different things, bear, but you're generally not going to see them all in one day.
Right.
Yeah. Have you had a favorite hunt, or what's been traditionally your favorite hunting in Africa?
Kudu and probably Cape buffalo. Bush buck can be really fun too.
I think that's most like our whitetail. They're so shy and elusive, and it's not a give me to get a bush buck.
Right. And your explanation about the kudu being the African elk, you're pretty close. With a little whitetail mixed in. I notice when they jump and they flash that white tail over their backs and they leap through there, they kind of look like a cross between an elk and a whitetail.
Isn't it just, I think it's impossible for anybody that loves wildlife and hunting, to go to Africa and not fall in love with kudu. It is just so majestic and so beautiful. And it's amazing, too, because, I lived there half the year, and it's amazing to me. We'll shoot, the property where my house is pretty big, over 400,000 acres. But, I don't know in that valley how many kudu, but, in 40 years ago, too, there really weren't kudu in there. It was very rare.
Yeah.
But, maybe we shoot 30, 40 like old bulls this year. And there's about a month where you see them. And then when you get far away from the rut, I'll see kudu every day, multiple every day. And when the rut's way over, like I'll go a month and not see a kudu bull. It's like, they're huge. They're the size of an elk. And it's like, where do they hide?
Yeah.
And they still, it lives in this little valley.
Yeah.
You'll go 6 months and not see it. And it's amazing how well. I guess that's the whole gray ghost thing, but it's amazing how well.
Yeah, it's interesting how secret they are compared to, say, a oryx or even a sable. I know a sable is a magnificent African antelope.
Yes,
just a beautiful form, but they're sort of they're out there. They just don't have that wariness that the kudu seems to have inherent in it.
It seems to me like with my hunting, if you are somewhere around sable where there are no lions, they seem to be pretty relaxed.
Or where they're expensive and not everyone's shooting at them all the time.
But, I've been in like Nasa, for instance, in northern Mozambique, and on a lion hunt. and there's sable there, and they are wild.
Wild there.
And like there was, I shot a sable there, and it wasn't an easy hunt. And it was shot it in thick brush at 100 yards and could see just part of it, and they seemed incredibly wild there. And I was like, it's probably because they actually have real predators there.
Yeah.
Even like in your videos, even the difference between when you're in Mozambique, like the baboons in Mozambique versus at Crusader. Granted, at Crusader, every time we see a baboon, we're trying to shoot it, but just that same, just same idea. Like if they're not getting shot at, they got no fear.
Yeah. That's something I noticed when people will say, well, those ranch hunts aren't real. They're not wild Africa. You're on a ranch. There might even be a fence around 20,000 acres or 400,000 acres, but that's not fair because there's a fence around it. I have never seen animals as tame in one of those fenced ranches as I saw them in the wilderness of Mozambique. Yeah. Because in this wilderness area in Mozambique, they are only shooting less than 5% of the population of whatever species they're hunting annually. And they're only senescent males, 10, 13-year-old male. So they go through, they glass, they drive, they walk, and they don't bother the wildlife. And the herds just go, oh, here come some people, big deal. 100 yards away from a herd of sable, and they're yawning. Mm-hmm. And then once every month, they might shoot one, old guy, and it's over. So what's spooking them? Whereas on the fenced ranches, people are coming through and they're hunting a variety of 29 different species, and more rifle shots are going off. There's more disturbance, and everything's a little spookier.
Yeah.
It's interesting to even see, too, like if you drive the truck, they see the truck driving by, they don't care. But as soon as the truck stops, they split.
That's because when the truck stops,
go, oh, whoa.
We've seen this
somebody
happen.
getting out.
What's your podcast called?
Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast. Pretty creative over there.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm not going to get lost. I got it. What do you normally talk about on there? What's the subject?
The emphasis is guns and ammo and ballistics, performance, the things you guys are real familiar with. Seems to be the most popular. We will entertain anything and everything that has to do with guns, shooting, and hunting. I like a good conservation message, but you can't sell that very well if you indulge it too much, too often.
Sure.
You sort of have to slip it in. People want to find out about, well, what can I buy to shoot farther and faster and better and more accurately, and how do I build a better mousetrap? They just love the tools and the how-to stuff. And over the years, I've picked up enough information about ballistics and shooting and things that I think I've got a little bit of knowledge to share.
Sure. Yeah,
but I always try to keep an open mind when I make presentations, and if someone writes in and says, you're full of it, you got that wrong, I will investigate and entertain that and not get upset with anybody because I don't know everything. And I always say what I'm producing here is the information to share with you folks, hoping that you will then share with me and everyone else.
Sure.
And so that we get it right.
Well, and reserve the right to change your mind because you could learn new stuff in the future. Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's what was important to me about getting you on here is the stuff, the content that I had seen you put out about 8.6 was good content, but it's in early stages. It's in the development that I think obviously the people that are developing it here, we know there's so much information that hasn't been proliferated through the masses yet that it's like you only know what you can find on the internet or find in gun stores or whatever. And I know that, I mean, the reason that I started watching your content is because like I just like to learn in general. And you're clearly passionate about the things that you talk about. A lot of them were cartridges that I didn't know about before, never had any experience with, and I got to learn about them. And so I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I know other people clearly are interested. So you got to check this one out. I know it's not your normal cup of tea, and I know you're kind of dabbling in it, but you got to learn this one because you're going to be excited about this one too. And so that was important for me because I was like, I know it's not exactly the first thing you do always, but I know you'll be interested in it and you'll learn something. And that's why it was important to get you here.
That makes me think of like Ian McCullum's content.
Exactly.
Too. It's all the weird content he has. You know, it's about firearms and this, but all these strange guns and things that where are you going to learn about it elsewhere or see it or even think to look at it? So I love some of that content as well.
And in an age where, I mean, people's attention spans are not what they used to be. Not a ton of people, whether it's they don't have time or they just don't have the interest and also the availability to sit down and read about it in a book. It's a lot easier for someone to put your podcast on while they're cooking dinner or doing something, multitasking, and they're learning while they're actively doing something else. It's so much more palatable. So that's how you educate the masses.
Yeah, that was an eye-opener for me when people started commenting that they liked to listen to me, I would ask, do you want me to drone on for an hour, or should we cut these down to half hour? Because people don't want to be involved for that long anymore. You think 5 minutes maybe is better. And most folks will say they want an hour or even longer because they're working in the shop or they're doing the dishes or something, and it's background information.
Sure.
Why not? Sure. So you don't have to take the time to sit down and read it. You're doing something else while you get the information. Makes perfect sense.
Well, I mean, I think in our factory, probably half the guys over there, guys and gals, are probably half of them listen to podcasts while they're working. On a variety of things. I love asking them what they're listening to. I learn a bunch of stuff from them. Podcast. It's like everybody's got their own interest, and it's fascinating. What are some of your favorite firearms for hunting? Like, what are some of your favorite rifles?
I've sort of become a bolt action man. I started off with lever actions back in the 60s when I was a kid, but bolt actions were the thing in the last third of the 20th century.
Sure.
And then especially when the lightweight started coming in with the fiber barrels or stocks before the barrels became carbon. But I was shooting like ultralight arms in the late 80s. Got in with a Mel Forbes ultralight arms rifle from
Mel Forbes?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That became, I think, Barrett Firearms bought that, right? Or
Wilson Combat.
Is that who has it now?
Yes, Wilson Combat. And Mel just passed away last month.
Oh, man.
Yeah. He was quite an innovator in the old style of evolving, like, okay, here's the rifle, bolt action, push feed. How do I make it 2 pounds lighter?
Yes.
He did that.
Make the action the proper size for the cartridge.
And beautifully accurate and functional and everything else.
Oh,
you guys have taken it to a whole nother level with
I
this
think
fix.
I've seen stuff where like the front, basically the front lug of the action, you shave that down a little bit, like little stuff? Or is that something different?
That was different. Yeah, that was the Kafaru.
Oh, okay.
He got that thing under 4 pounds. That was just a Model 7, and he stripped it down. He just shaved everything off that wasn't essential.
It wasn't necessary.
Crazy.
Yeah, but what Mel did was he just took the synthetic stock, real stiff, bedded the barrel full length so he could use a fairly thin barrel. He didn't use a real pencil thin barrel, but it was fairly light. 22-inch, short action, 284 Winchester was his idea of the ultimate sheep rifle, I agreed with, 7mm bullet. Pretty hard to beat.
Great bullet,
yeah, great bullet. Get high BCs, and then you get your short action, keeps your weight down. I forgot what his stock weight, about 20 ounces or something, but it was really stiff, and it shot
Very
like a house on
innovative
fire.
for the time.
Yeah, really was. Hunted with that a lot, and that became a favorite for a long time. But I would play around with all of them. As part of my job as being a rifles editor at Sporting Classics magazine, I had to try all kinds of things and a bunch of other magazines I wrote for. And I was always interested in different things. And then I became more and more interested in the classic stuff. If you read the Africa, Rourke and Hemingway and all the rest of them, you want some African rifles, right?
Yes.
So blue, steel, and walnut. But then Frederick Salou, falling block single shots. Ooh, I like those. I got into the Dakota number 10 or Model 10 falling block single shot, the most elegant, lightweight, trim, beautifully balanced little hunting rifle. Yeah, you've only got one shot, but you've got only one animal, one tag, bang, you're done, right?
I was gonna say the Ruger number 1 did fine.
Shooting more. What's your favorite dangerous game cartridge?
If I had to pick the powerhouse that I think would really do anything and everything, I'd go with the 458 Lot. Wow. It outperforms the 470 Nitro Express in a more affordable, convenient bolt action rifle. I love double barrels for bird hunting, and I think I would probably get to be pretty good with one in a rifle format, but I've just never had one or could afford one with which to work. And it's just easier to stick with the familiar bolt action and go with a 458 Lot and produce more energy.
That's a great.
I heard those boys kick. Those 458 Lots.
Yeah, you've shot something with that.
Yeah.
My PH, that's what he carries. He's got a CZ and 458 Lot. And that's what he carries in case I mess up with 8.6 or 375. So,
no, I've actually shot more big stuff with the 375 than the 458.
That's a wonderful cartridge too.
Yeah, it is. It'll do everything you need to do. You get the right bullet in it. You really don't need the bigger stuff. It's just sort of, well, I'm in Africa. I'm shooting a big danger or something or other. I need to use that big rifle. Yeah. Where else are you going to use it, right?
Because I would, part of my frustration with hunting so much in Africa, and it's frustration. It's like frustrating things about it is, so I'm always testing stuff like our stuff and all these different things. And so I'm like, oh man, I could get really efficient if I had the same setup every time. But every time I go, it's a different caliber, different barrel length, or if it's 8.6 super sub, a different optic that I'm testing for something. Everything's different. So it's like a first time every time. But it is also part of the fun. I love testing the new stuff and seeing.
Yeah.
And like you said, I took the fixed rifle and used it in 308 over there. I used it in 6.5 a lot. And this last time I took 6mm Creedmoor, which I think is probably a decent, like, sheep cartridge. Maybe it's a little small bullet wise, but
it'll work. I've used it in Africa for bush buck, mountain reed buck, those size animals.
Yeah. It's 6mm is so easy to shoot. Oh
yeah, it's like shooting a 22.
Yes. So I've used what else I use over there? 6 arc, that new.
Oh yeah.
Matt brought one over.
He showed
even 5.56 with a good, like a 70 grain Barnes bullet. It's been good, and I have a little 4-pound gun, for spring buck or even warthog and stuff
Impala.
like that. Yeah, Impala. So some of that, it's fun to me. 375, that's the parent cartridge for the 300 Win Mag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Most of the early Weatherby mags were all based off the 375 or its sibling, the 300 H&H Magnum. But that was your first big belted Magnum cartridge. 7 Rem mag, 264 Win Mag, 458 Win Mag, all of those. That's the base for them all.
Yeah. What's your favorite, what shotgun you like using right now for all your birds?
Oh, boy. I love over and unders, but I also like good old side-by-sides with double triggers.
Really?
The way it was intended to be.
Yeah. 20 gauge side-by-side with double triggers, improved cylinder and modified.
So you haven't gone to 28 gauge yet?
I've got a couple of those too. I really love the 28 gauge.
Yes. If you're going to shoot a bunch, that's... nice.
Yeah. I picked
the 6 Creedmoor of the shotgun.
There you go. I picked one up. I think it was 1996. Ruger was coming out with their 28 gauge Ruger Red Label guns. Mm-hmm. They built one in 28. I don't think for very many years, but I picked one up pretty quickly when it came out, thinking that's just going to be my quail gun. Maybe I'll shoot some doves with it. I started dove hunting with it, and I think the first night I took it out, I shot. I won't swear to the numbers, but something like 13 shots and I got 10 doves or some crazy thing like that.
Great.
This just doesn't happen. So I thought, well, I'll try it on some ruffed grouse. And I got some ruffed grouse with it. And I thought, well, I'll try it on a blue grouse. Well, I'll try it on a pheasant. I tried it on everything. Canada geese, mallards, everything. You just can't stop that thing.
Yeah. And it's like, why do I have 12 or 20 gauge?
Exactly. I rarely shoot a 12 anymore.
Yeah.
If I'm going to go for the big gun, it's a 20 gauge. Otherwise, a 28. It's just amazing.
Have you hunted much with handguns?
No, not very much at all with handguns. I have a few, and I've tried it a few times, but I've been really thinking of getting into squirrel hunting with a 22 handgun.
I set a gun up 20 years ago for that.
Yeah?
A single 6 with a scope and the whole thing. I don't think I've ever shot a squirrel.
Old Razor Dobbs, he's a handgun boy. 10 mil. He was shooting black wildebeest with 10 mil at like 100 yards, getting full pass through. There's a video of it. I'll show you. It's crazy.
But do you know Brett Voorhees? He's the CEO of Taurus USA.
Okay.
And so, great fella. He was over at Crusader with me a little while back, and he brought their, what is it?
It's a 460
Raging Hunter.
Yeah, it's a 460 Smith & Wesson Magnum.
He shot a buffalo at 4 yards with it.
What was that? Is a revolver?
Yes.
Chambered for a what?
460.
So you can shoot 460,
460, okay.
460 Smith & Wesson Magnum. You can also shoot 454 Casull out of it and 45 Colt.
Yeah.
So it's a cool
That's
gun.
cool. Yeah,
I've got one.
Cool.
Sweet.
Yeah,
haven't
so
killed anything with it. But.
They spotted on one hill in the bush from another, and when they made their approach, he had moved a little. They were trying to come in above it, like 30 yards, and ends up it was 4 yards because it had moved up in their stalk. And, in the bush, you don't know till you get there. And it's videoed. Unfortunately, they were uphill from it, only 4 yards, but he was facing away. And so it worked out good. And, Brett lit him up. And
he'll be here next week. He can tell the story.
Oh, yeah. Pretty great experience. That was his first buffalo.
Crazy one.
The only thing I ever killed with a 460 S&W was a fence post. A wooden fence post. I wanted to see if I could cut that fence post off with one cylinder, and I did it.
Oh, you did?
Oh,
Yeah.
That 460 is no joke.
No, man, that thing has got some horsepower.
I remember when I had my first range, I built like a little farm in Georgia 25 years ago now. Had 30, 40 acres, built a 300-yard range, and it's beautiful. And, you know, I had a lot of machine guns and stuff at the time, and I was like, there was a tree, you know, I left trees for shade, and there was one I wanted down. And so we're sitting there one day, and I had it's made by Steyr, an MG74, so like a modern MG42, but in 308, had the tripod and everything. I was like, hey, I want to take that tree down. You know, my buddy's like, let's get a chainsaw and do it. I was like, man, I wonder how many 308 rounds it would take. So we're sitting there, and I remember he's like, oh, it's going to take a belt. I said, 100 rounds. I was like, I think it's going to be like 250. So I don't remember what it was. It was like 750 or 1,250 rounds later. You know, and it was like a poplar tree that's like this big around. You know, and it was like 1,000 rounds of ammo. You know, we have it set up on the tripod, so you're hitting it with every shot.
Yeah.
So to take down the fence post with one cylinder, way better than I did.
It wasn't a real big fence post.
The stuff that you do when boy with guns and
Well, this is how we figure these things out too. You know, there's the book knowledge, and then there's practical knowledge.
that's right. Testing.
With the book knowledge, is there are there, I guess for the listener, are there 3 books that you could, for someone who wants to get into what we're talking about, the hunting, the adventure side, you can do 4 if you want to, but are there 3 books that someone has to read and that you know will get them juiced to whether it doesn't need to be Africa necessarily, it could be the U.S., but just into hunting, into that adventure?
You know, one of them's going to throw you for a loop. And remind me toward the end here if I forget it. I'll save it for last.
All
but
right.
any Jack O'Connor book from this 20th century is worth having because he had everything nailed. You're going to be missing some of the modern things, you know, but the basics to really get to understand. His rifle book is a great one. I forget the title. I think it's just Rifles and Shooting by Jack O'Connor, something like that. That's a really good one. These days, we've got some great ballisticians writing things like Brian Litz.
Oh, yeah.
He really will tune you in on what's going on with those bullets flying through the air, the kind of stuff you can't see. Yeah, really worth knowing if you're interested.
That's whose video it was, the one-on-one that I was thinking of.
He's done a lot of testing on 8.6 because he'd never, like with his app and everything, there's, you know, theory, but until you go shoot fast twist. So he was a big part of the testing, like 2-mile Doppler radar stuff.
Okay.
And because his app, as sophisticated as it was, couldn't predict the drop of 8.6.
Yeah.
So it's been awesome. And so he's helped us to understand stuff, and he's learned a lot.
Great.
So it's been great. Yeah, so I think he's the authority. Bro.
Yeah. So get his. You got several. And then for the hunting end of it, boy, we're going to have to throw a few books out there. You know, Roosevelt's African Hunting Africa Camp Trails, is that what it's called?
Yes.
Roosevelt's?
Yes, it is. Africa Camp Trails. Because I'm thinking of his first book, the ranch one, but it's different.
And, gosh, there's so many great African ones, but Rourke, I think, Robert Rourke is probably even better than Green Hills of Africa by Hemingway.
Yeah.
But one of those two to get you fired up for Africa.
Yes.
They just capture the magic that makes you want to go.
I don't know the legit. I mean, everyone talks about this person may have embellished a bit or whatever, but it's hard to not like Capstick's books. Like Death in the Long Grass is real hard to not like.
Well, it's telling the story. I mean, to me, there is, if you want, like, what's the purpose of the story? If you're just like recounting a factual event, or is it like, how do you explain? Like I think the beauty of the art of writing, and when people are good at it, it's like what you're trying to do is put someone, like when you have one of these moments, like this aha moment of whatever it is in life, Like, how do you, like, what you're really trying to convey is that emotion to someone. Like, what's the story really?
Right.
Like, I tell the one about, like, when I was 6 years old, 1980, it was June. I was at my parents' house. Wonder Woman came on TV. Linda Carter. I think it was the first time I ever saw cleavage. I didn't even know how I felt, but I knew it was different. And I just knew, like, I have to have one of those. Like, that's what I want. Like, I want, like, a Linda Carter. How did
that explains his Wonder Doll collection.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
But there was that, and then the other one that I had like that was the first time I shot a gun with a silencer. It was an MP5 SD, and I'd never shot or heard a silencer, and they let me shoot it. And this is honestly what happened. So I shoot the gun, and there was a piece of steel like 80 meters or something, and I shoot it, and I'd shot a lot of guns at that point, but was very novice. And I thought I didn't shoot again. I thought the bullet stuck in the barrel. And then when it goes ding, I was with some Navy SEALs, and I was like, the hell? I just didn't expect it to be that quiet. And I shoot it again. And then I'd ask them, they have like all their guns out. So, like 300 Win Mag, and they had their machine guns and stuff. And it's like, why don't all your guns have silencers? Like, why is this the only gun with a silencer? We don't know. It's like, so that's really, I think, what captured my passion. I was 18 or maybe I was 19 by then, but it's what I started my business. And like, I loved firearms, but it probably wouldn't have been like my vocation. But that moment. And so I think it's like when I try to tell people about like my passion for silencer, tell that story, it's like, I remember the temperature. I remember it was early morning. It was hot and the steam coming off the ground. I remember everything about that moment. Same thing like I do when I'm sitting on my parents' couch when I'm 6 and I saw Linda Carter. But that's the thing you try. So to me, if like the guy embellishes, big deal.
I love it.
If he's
way.
Like spiriting people to go to Africa to seek adventure, it's the right story.
Yeah, he's got the adventure stories.
He certainly does.
And then my last one that I told you was going to kind of throw you for a loop is Aldo Leopold's Sand County Almanac. This is from a hunter.
My grandmother
boring, doesn't it?
My grandmother used to read the Farmer's Almanac. That's all I know.
He was a biologist, and he had a little farm up in Wisconsin. He was teaching at a university, somewhere with biology and all that good stuff. And he's sort of he's a beautiful writer, and he captures what we as hunters feel about our relationship with nature while he's teaching us about the ecosystems and how it all works with passion. So it's not a dry sort of textbook for biologists, nor is it a passion, let's go kill a big buck.
Right.
But it captures a little bit of all of that, and it goes much deeper. You feel it as much as you think it while you read it. You go, I've known that all my life. I've never articulated it. This man articulates it while he educates you, and you learn so much about our relationship to the world and why this sustainable hunting use thing we've been talking about works.
Yes.
And it can help you really understand that and help explain it perhaps to some non-hunters.
That's interesting.
And non-hunters will enjoy this book as well if they've got a little bit of a scientific bent to their thinking,
right,
and can think pragmatically and practically.
How old were you when you read that?
I was in college when I got introduced to it by I think a biology teacher.
Do you think it would make the same impression if you read it now for the first time?
Boy, that's hard to say.
Because you got me excited to read it, but I wonder some of these things.
Yeah, I think it would still work for you. I think at my age now, it's just too hard to tell because there's too much water under the bridge.
Sure.
You know, I've read that and applied it and then gone beyond it. When I was working with fish and game agencies, I had to explain this stuff from the biologist in to layman's terms, so I had to learn a lot of it. But that was the start when I read him and went, oh, I've known this since I was 12, 13 years old, wanting to go hunting anything that I could.
Really understood it.
Never really understood it, but he captured that passion and he tied it together with the science.
Wonderful. Those are always the best teachers.
Yeah.
Like in our childhood, you know, like you probably remember 2 teachers from school, you know, and it's always the ones that can do that.
You got any books or anything? I know you.
I'm going through them now. I'm reading like the one, but you know, like reading is difficult for me.
Yeah.
But so I listen to a lot of stuff. But so Guy got over in Africa. He got me a book about Salu.
Cool.
And so I'm reading that now.
Super cool.
And, it's just fascinating, like his view on stuff and, but a lot of the hunting stuff, not just his military and, being in Rhodesia and all that.
Yeah.
But, and his ideas about conservation and what he saw, happening in Africa then.
Yeah.
But that's just the current one. The stuff that I love the most are actually the storytellers.
Yeah.
Like my reading comprehension is very poor, and it's just like a lifelong problem, which is a pain in the ass. But it's Rad is a terrific storyteller. My PH, Rad Robertson,
unbelievable,
and he has hunted everything in Africa, and he lived in Zambia for like 8 years, just hunting lion and elephant and all that. And then Guy Finter, and he writes for some of the magazines over there occasionally. Still, like when you go to the airport in Joburg and you go in the police station there, the customs stuff, whatever magazine that is they give away. The first time I went over, I opened it up and started reading the story. I was waiting on them, and it was written by him.
I didn't know that.
So cool. I mean, he was in Zim, so he was in Rhodesia in the police when all this stuff was going on, and like there, and so he became so when he left Zim, he has been a PH ever since, and he's hunted I think like 200 elephants, and or been a PH or a camera guy or involved in that, and just everything. But hearing their stories is the things that I love, because it makes generally a better impression on me than me trying to just read it.
Yeah, I get excited about like hearing about like first times again. Like if I were to answer my own question. I mean, some of them wouldn't even be hunting books, but like there's a book that came out a few years ago called The Optimist by David Coggins. He's a fly fisher. And that book covers from when he got introduced to it to kind of where he is now, some pivotal like adventures he went on as a fly. And just like, I mean, at the time I was fishing every day, so I'm already in the middle of it, but reading him and his excitement about the first of this fish that he caught and the first of them, I'm like, oh, I gotta go. Like, cause it gives you that feeling again of like, oh, I remember the first time I caught that fish or that. Obviously Green Hills.
Well, yeah, those are the ones when I started going to Africa is Hemingway and Roosevelt is what I was like, I have to go do it.
Yeah, exactly.
But you have to read Selous. You already mentioned Selous, Frederick Selous, and Bell. William Darrell Maitland Bell. Karamojo Bell, the Elephant Hunter, Wanderings of an Elephant Hunter. Oh my gosh, you guys haven't read that one?
No, but I'm about to. Guy got me a whole series of all of his favorite Africa hunting books. I have them all at my house.
This is from around 1898 until 1914 or so, when he went off to World War I.
Yeah, he was wild.
Prime time.
He was hunting in Uganda with the seven. He's the guy who took the 757 and shot 800 elephant with it.
Got to read them.
Got to read them.
I'm gonna have to write that one down.
It's historic.
Man, can you imagine that? Oh.
173 grain bullet, going 2,400 feet per second. Averaged 1.5 bullets per elephant.
Wow.
I mean, they didn't start really shooting them with big calibers.
No, they were shooting with the big stuff. They were shooting two-bore shotguns, but they didn't have the bullets. Jesus. It would be a lead bullet would kind of go splat.
Turn into a
shoot them again and again. Yeah. And he figured out with his military bullet, brain shot, he studied the anatomy, so he knew where to shoot him in the brain from any angle, so he could get into a herd and just start. And this was, people are going to hear this and say, oh my gosh, you're slaughtering all the elephants. This was 120 years ago.
And it's also, people don't understand, like generally when you go cull elephants, like you have to cull the entire herd. That's painful for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. Corbett.
Yes.
So with all the
tigers,
India, the tigers and the leopard. That's why I have so I have his same double. Like that's my double rifle. Yeah. So a Jeffries 450. 400.
Yeah, I like that 450-400.
I've always been curious about that.
They auctioned his gun a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I think at Rock Island. No finish left on his gun except under the fore-end. And I think he shot like 600 or 800 tigers and leopards with that gun. It's like something ridiculous.
That 450-400, I heard it's fairly mild for those big calibers to shoot.
It's the greatest because you get great penetration and the recoil is nothing.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Like a 100-pound.
I've always been interested in it since I found out about it. When am I going to shoot one?
I think it's one of the best cartridges. I love that cartridge.
I do too.
So that's why I have that gun. It's made within the couple years when his was made. It's the exact same model and barrel length.
Yeah. Is your 1903, isn't it? A couple serial numbers off of Hemingway's
Not
or something?
serial numbers.
Or,
So like Hemingway, like his Griffin and Howe 30-06 that was built. So I have one. It was made like the same year.
Oh,
as
yeah,
his.
yeah.
So I have his exact same
Yeah.
gun. And it's interesting because Pat found some stuff about that he wrote because he got it with the scope mount and all, and he hated the scope mount and the scope, so he took it off, and he never really hunted with the scope.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got one that with the scope mount and all this stuff.
yeah.
That's about the hardest recoiling gun I have.
Probably even
178 grain EL DX.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd rather shoot 100 rounds through that double than 2 through that gun.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, so I do like all that nostalgic stuff too. If I can find things from
Yeah.
these guys that were just men that went and did this stuff.
Well, I think that's part of why we kind of covered a little bit with the lever gun stuff, and you're seeing these trends, and lever guns are becoming big again. Like we said, partly some legality stuff. You can own lever guns in places that you can't own ARs, perhaps.
That's true. I didn't think about that.
But I think that these stories of, especially in a time where right now there are a lot of men who aren't doing such manly things, or don't have
we're not very manly.
don't have
compared to 100 years
don't have
ago.
really manly capabilities right now. But I think you get people that read these books, whether it be Salou, Capstick, Hemingway, Roosevelt, even people outside of that, like Endurance, Ernest.
Lance Armstrong.
No, the
Shackleton?
Shackleton, yes. Like that's a great book just on leadership of what that book is like. These crazy expeditions, like Lewis and Clark. You have these people reading about all these things and being like, "Whoa, we got to go do that." Like
It's all just a willingness to suffer or risk.
yeah. And I mean, I think that people have this misconception that it has to be, you have to go to Africa to do it, or you have to go to Alaska or whatever. And I told Ron at lunch, like, I have a mini fix. I have a fix. I know when we hunt for work, that's what we use. And I know how effective it is. And it makes everything simple. It makes it easy. But like when I shot the deer that I shot out behind my house this past year, like I was like, I'm not on safari. I don't have a safari gun. I don't have Nick's Model 70 375, but I had a Woodstock CZ 30-06 with no scope on it. I was like, I'll make my own safari. Like I'll do it harder than it needs to be for no reason other than I just want to make it a little tougher. And I did it and I felt fulfilled. And I think that that's something that now, am I going to do it this year? No, maybe I'll bring a fix this year because it's a little easier. I don't have to hump around that wood gun all the way.
Yeah, I use and I tell you, even if no one were watching, I would use a fix 90% of the time.
Well, I mean,
It's like I think it's the best utility gun, the best hunting gun. It just solves so many problems that exist with other guns that we just tolerate because there wasn't an option, or that's the way it's always been.
I mean, look at what Crusader's doing now. Like you guys were just there, and your wife used a fix. She was handed a fix. Like, and they laughed at the fix initially. Like,
I got, oh my God, what is this? I couldn't even believe it was over there. But I
They
but I
said
didn't.
the same thing.
I didn't necessarily want Betsy using my new custom 757 Falling Black single shot Park West Arms rifle.
well, she said it. She said it doesn't shoot, so maybe she didn't want to use it.
It's too long for her anyway.
Yeah.
She was already complaining I should cut some of the stock down for her, and that wasn't going to happen. So I was pretty excited when he pulled that little fix out. I said, that fixes my problem.
See the fix. Yeah.
And boy, did she love that thing. She liked it better than my 757.
Imagine
custom.
that. She's got good taste in a lot
Worked
of
out
things.
beautifully. One shot, one kill.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
my. It's been interesting to, I think too, with like my passion, I think about it a lot of times, and, I get a fair amount of hate online, and I ask for most of it. But it is interesting in this situation, and there's lots of guys in our industry that go and hunt like you do and like me, but I think as far as like gun companies and stuff like that, like I'm accessible being the owner, and I don't just do what the market says, or, these guys, we work on something, we design something, build it, and then I go and use it. So like I have a ton of practical experience. Like I don't know how many animals I've shot in Africa, maybe like 1,000 at this point. Like it's a lot. And because I love too, like even here, I'll see on forums or people DM me, say, hey, I have a fix 20-inch barrel 6.5, and I'm going on this elk hunt, and the outfitter said, absolutely not, you can't shoot an elk with 6.5. And I was like, Well, yeah.
I've seen some big stuff get killed
You
with 6.5.
can, does he want to account for you making a bad shot or whatever it is? But it is interesting getting to go use it. So like when I say, if somebody asks me about hunting or whatever it is, well, yeah, here's my experience, and absolutely you can do this with that gun and that cartridge, and here's the bullet that I use. And it's like, well, what the hell's Kevin? No, I don't know. I've shot 30 kudu. Like you want to hunt kudu. A lot of people have shot more than me, but I can tell you I've shot like 30 in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. So I love that too, that I don't have to think about, necessarily just theory of our products, but, like with Subsonic with 8.6, it was so exciting for me to see like you doing a video and comparing it to these other ones and like your thoughts on it, because it's like, this is all true. This is new stuff that we're doing. And so we can shoot gel and we can do all that. And then I can give it to you and tell you what it did in the gel. So it's going to do this to an animal. Or, oh yeah, you can shoot, whatever, a Gibbs bucket, 275 yards with Subsonic 8.6 with a 5-pound gun. You'll be fine. Would I have told people that before I went and did it? No. I would say, well, it should work and all that. But I go do it. And I can tell you, you can make a good shot. You're going to put a hole all the way through it. That bullet's going to expand. You are not going to track that animal.
That's something that we just haven't tracked over the decades is momentum of a bullet. It's the big, heavy Elmer Keith style, slow, heavy bullet versus the fast, high-speed shock bullet. And we argue those to this day.
I love both.
Yeah, they both work in one way or another. But this idea of a slow-moving, really heavy bullet, most of us don't know anything about it.
Yes.
Because who shoots anything that way anymore? But you look back at the buffalo hunters, the bison hunters.
45, out of a moving train or something.
The crazy distances and stuff they could shoot that, was it Dixon, the Adobe Walls fight where he shot that Indian? They were surrounding him in the Battle of Adobe Walls out in Texas Panhandle. Was it a mile? I think he shot with his buffalo rifle.
Yeah, probably
51-10 or whatever heck he had.
If you can hit him, that bullet's gonna work.
500 grain bullet. I mean, it looks like it's a long ways away, and it's got a big looping trajectory. But that's a lot of weight carrying a lot of momentum.
Yeah.
Well, even like the El Capitan or whatever, the Browning high power.
Oh yeah.
With the 800-meter sight or whatever on it. World War II. So that model of the high power, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
There's a reason there's an 800-meter sight on it. It's not a joke. Like, it's ridiculous, but if you make contact with somebody's noggin at that distance, it's going to put a hole through it.
Well, that was Alabama Arsenal did a couple of years ago a video of with a mini fix, a 300 Blackout sub at 1,000 yards. And granted, he had to prop it up a little bit. He ran out of room to dial, but people were like, "This is fake. This isn't real." It's like, no, you can do it, and when it gets there, it's gonna probably kill you. But it's just you got to be able to get it out there.
Yeah, no. Back to that, like the hunting stuff and all. A thing that, and it's interesting to me how you and I are kind of arriving at the same place. It sounds like as far as wildlife and conservation and the adventure side of it and all the things, and like where you started and then where I started. Like growing up, and I said I didn't know anyone that hunted or anything when I was growing up, but. Something that really inspired me with Hemingway, and I tell these guys this story, and with Roosevelt, it's not just these guys became famous, and it's like for years, these guys were incredibly successful, lived these incredible lives, and they weren't young when they went to Africa. And I mean, you think about the life that, well, either one of them, but like Hemingway, for instance, from the time he was 17, all the shit that he did and was involved in, like the spectacular life, and one of the most famous men in the world, and got to do all these crazy things. And then later in his life, he goes to Africa and it changes his life.
Yeah.
It wasn't somebody that, like, when I asked you when you read that book how old you were, like I was very impressionable up until my probably mid-20s with stuff like that. And of course, when you're young and you see something or experience something for the first time. But these were guys who lived the fullest lives. And then not in the first half of their lives, but in the second half, they go to Africa and it changes their lives.
It starts it all over again.
And it's like, if it changed their lives, imagine what the hell it's going to do to my life.
Yeah.
And that was like a spirit that kind of why I wanted to go and wanted to go now. This is several years ago now, and I still feel that way. And it's so funny. Everybody that I convinced to go over there that's never been, they come over and hunt with me. Generally within the first couple of days, they see, I see why you're in love here, like why you love this place, like why you do it. It's amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
You know, because it's like you say, like you working for yourself or not doing more with YouTube or doing more with your podcast. It's like you're free. I mean, that's really what it is. And when I go there, I feel way more free than I feel here. Like whether it's hunting or just being there, and it's like what an adventure and what an awesome place Africa is.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who are hunters, and they go, I don't just get that African stuff. I mean, I want to go moose hunting and caribou hunting and all. But I said, yeah, because you're familiar with that. You go to Africa and see it, you'll become familiar with it really quickly. But I always say it's your heritage as a hunter on planet Earth. You're not isolated to North America just because you happen to be hatched here.
Yeah.
You can go other places, and you got to consider where man came from. We all pretty much came out of Africa. That's as much our heritage as anyone who's living there or was born there in the last 20, 40 years. Go there and see it for yourself, because this is your one shot at it. You're going to see it now, or you're not going to see it at all.
Well, I think as Americans in general, we're a lot of times just so pompous and then so ignorant. People ask me all the time, oh, South Africa, it's so dangerous. How do you go over there? And I'm like, what? It's like, well, okay. Well, Johannesburg, you
go to Chicago, go to Baltimore, Jacksonville.
and it's like I live an hour from a town, like out in the country. It's like, I've never seen a cop. And there's a reason. It's not because they're afraid to go because there's a bunch of crime. It's like it's wonderful and it's safe to travel to, and it's the most familiar out of the African countries, for what we're used to. But it's so much ignorance about it still, and going over there. And it's wonderful for like you and I, because your dollar goes so far there too.
Oh yeah.
They're like, what's it cost to go shoot a bear and a moose in Alaska?
$30,000. Yeah.
Yep.
Easily.
If not more. A bear and a moose, double that. Sorry. Yeah.
And for $60,000, what you can get in Africa, that could be a 3-month safari.
Yeah.
So, and you can end up, instead of with 2 animals, you can end up with 100 animals. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, what else?
I don't know. I know we're going to do, I know you guys want to do a podcast with old Nicholas Schaefer and get down and dirty with the details of 8.6 and Fast Twist. And
that's so great.
So I think
Nick is if you don't like Nick Schaefer, you're just not a good person. He is such a wonderful guy.
Yeah, I sure enjoyed building that rifle with him. Good little instructor. Not little, big instructor.
Yeah, he's wonderful. We're lucky to have him, and what a lot of knowledge that guy has.
Yeah, I'm impressed with your whole crew. Everybody in the shop, I saw they were looked like they were having a great time at whatever task they were involved in, building things, and nobody was looking unhappy or disgruntled.
Yeah,
of course.
And you didn't see anyone walking around looking over their shoulder with a whip or anything like that?
No. I saw a couple of whips in the corner.
Yeah,
blood was dry.
Those are different.
Yeah, I mean, I think like my job, reality is, I hope just to be like the biggest cheerleader and supporter of these guys, and then create an environment that, they can thrive in, and to where if they couldn't work here, you'd have to drag them out of the building.
That sounds pretty
then
good.
I know I'm being successful.
Yeah.
And these guys, and I'm so proud of them and the work they're doing, and seeing them and the way they work, especially the engineering team that you spent some time with and stuff. It's interesting. We hired a bunch of new junior engineers this year, and we're growing. And it's one kid that had been an intern for SIG up the street, and they had offered him a job, and he's a brilliant kid. And so he was trying to decide. So he sent his resume here too, and he has a wonderful resume, and could see why SIG is wanting to hire him full time now that he just graduated. And he was, and so I met him when he came in for his interview, his second interview, and was talking to him. And I remember talking to him, and, it was Nick and Mitch were leading him around and spending the time with him and interviewing him. And he asked me, which was a pretty great question, why would I come work here over SIG? Like, yeah, that's a great question. And I said, well, I'll tell you like this. SIG is a great company. You're going to have a career there. You're going to have a good job. You're going to have stability, all these things that maybe your parents say. If you were my kid, I would tell you to come here and work for free and sleep on the floor, because what you're going to learn here is how to be an engineer. Like these guys and their work ethic and how they work and get their hands dirty, and they do all the testing. Like engineering school, it's like a lot of school. You learn a bunch of theory and you learn some math, you don't learn how to be an engineer, and that's what you're going to learn here. And so I'm real proud of that and what they've created back there. And I think the products and stuff, it speaks to that. Like, you can't fake it.
Yeah.
You can call, like, I love marketing as much as I love guns. And I think generally I'm pretty good at it. But marketing is bullshit. But what I've found is, if you don't lie and you're doing the testing, you can say whatever you want. Mm-hmm. And it might sound like bullshit, but we put our money where our mouth is. And those guys do a great job of making me less of an idiot. And when I say, hey, you can do this, the gun does this, it does.
Yeah.
And we know it because of them and the testing and all the hard work they're doing.
Well, I am going to be looking forward to trying one of these fixed rifles with a 1 3-inch twist 8.6 Blackout cartridge. Whew, it'll be something new for me.
Do you have silencers?
No, we're going to be looking at some.
Don't have any silencers.
I have one, but it's not going to work with that hole size.
No, we got to get a.
We'll make sure you have a silencer. You don't need to be shooting with ear protection.
No, yeah. Well, we got to get her a 6.5 too. So, yeah,
Okay.
Jumbo Scramp.
Well, thank you so much for coming to visit us.
Thanks for inviting me. I would have never gotten here on my own.
Well, we're honored, and we're so glad that you'd make it all the way out here and
Appreciate
take a look at what we're doing. And I'm so interested to see if you report back to your listeners and everything, and what you think of it and how we're different, and why you should or shouldn't buy our products or believe in it.
Yeah, as soon as they get 100 African elephants down,
there
I'll
it
know.
is. There it is.
I can't wait. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Jay,
Glad you're back.
Yeah, glad you're here today too.
Yeah,
Jay.
that seat gets cold without you in it.